right.
Hmm.
Bonjour, bonjour, madame. It's
Bonjour.
Mademoiselle avec Homme. Joe Zabinski here, the author of a translation of a cool book from French. And the first time I saw you was maybe about 20 years ago. It was probably 1999 at Temple Tahuti in Vancouver.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That
Wow.
was probably one of my favorite times when traveling for the occult world was when I went to Vancouver.
Yeah, that was a good year at 99, and we did one 2001, and the one in between was in LA. How was that for your first how was that for a trip for you? Like, what are your memories of that? Like, I remember I was like 18 then, just graduated high school,
Yeah.
and just also gotten initiated that Easter of 99 in the portal.
Oh, okay.
Because it's good idea to line up completing the GD in general, not for everyone, but in general, I think it's a good idea to line up completing the Golden Dawn with high school, just to get that out of the way. So fucking weird, right? Fucking
it makes you into a strange person, I guess. I don't know.
I went to Waldorf school 13 years. I was already fucking weird.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we do our math with coloring blocks. And yet somehow end up with higher proficiency at math and advanced math by high school. I don't know how that works. Steiner must have been some kind of colorful genius. It's like, what about logarithms? How do we study those? Well, on one watercolor do blue, and on the other do red, then do a third and mix them together. And that's how we understand like algorithms and advanced math. He's like, it'll get you there. And for some people it did.
Yeah. There's this intuitive side. There's this intuitive side to mathematics that like you only come across every once in a while, right? Because like I feel like at least all the math education I've seen has been like it's been very mechanistic, right? Like this is how numbers work. You combine them with these special rules, and you can do all kinds of amazing things with them. But I mean, it took. I think I just understood that squaring a number is used in it basically comes from geometry, right?
Yeah.
And that concept is just I never learned it. Everything was so straight mechanical that I never really learned a lot about applying it to everyday things,
Yeah. So what was that like coming down to our temple in Vancouver, where we had that crazy week-long events? I heard you on Esoteric Nerd on Edward's podcast talking about the intensity. I loved it. It was great to hear you guys reminisce about the intensity of our conclaves, where we would, there'd be like 100 magicians there for a week solid, 24/7, with the space to accommodate pretty much. I mean, it's cramped. It's so in some ways, but in general, like no, like both Tahuti and ISIS could easily accommodate 100 people basically. If we'd gotten much larger, God, I don't know. And that was but those were epic events. It was cool to hear you and Edward talking about how much work you're doing, how you guys would we do stuff all day long, and then it's like 2 a.m. but there's still more stuff you can do, especially if you're doing some like late night advanced stuff, or they haul out the Goetic circle.
Right. Just depended on what you wanted to do. I think I feel like Power Rig was really like it was a foreshortened and more intense version of the way that we used to teach magic generally, right? Which was that the idea was that as teachers, we had the intention of advancing with the students, right? So as the students need to learn more stuff, the teachers need to get better at what they're doing, so that basically like there's just like perpetual growth going on, right? But then how do you combine that with logistics of a day, right? Like because as like early on we would have the earlier stuff, right? We would have the we would have events for grades that only had been there for a short time, and then as you go along, we're having more and more advanced things. But then it's like, if you're already advanced portal, if you're already an adept, you have to go to the lower grade stuff because you're helping with that, you're like participating in that, right? But then for your own growth, like the only time left is like midnight or like 1 a.m. or something. But I remember like my first really like my first strong successes with magic happened at those times when like when it was like 2 a.m. and like it was just like me and another person, and this other person wanted to do something like very, very specific, and I just remember this feeling of being like just beyond exhausted, right? Like you left the feeling of exhaustion behind like 4 or 5 hours ago.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And now you're now you really are like in an altered state because you're still conscious, but somehow but somehow you shouldn't be anymore, so you enter this sort of twilight state. And in that twilight state was some of like the most like rip roaring stuff that would happen. But you asked about Vancouver, and I think like I remember the difference between like the West Coast, like the California temple and the Vancouver temple, was that there was this
Temple Isis and Temple Tahuti.
Right. Yeah. So like Temple Tahuti, I remember just there being this vibe of there was this very pure vibe that people genuinely wanted to do something amazing. That's what it felt like to me.
Yeah.
And also there was sort of this audacity to it, right? Like I don't know, because I think like anybody who's dealt with Tehuti for any length of time like realizes what sort of God this is and what sort of power this is. And just to be in the same room as that sort of power for any amount of time, like you have to be a little bit audacious. You know what I mean? It's not going to hurt you as long as you I don't want to say play by the rules, because that's kind of missing the point, but
yeah, it's more nuanced.
Yeah, it's more nuanced than that. Right. Yeah. Right. But as long as you engage in the right way, you're not going to be hurt. But it's a little bit like, but I think even just going to Tehuti for Power Week, it was like, there was always this, it felt like there was a nuclear power plant somewhere in the building,
Well, yeah, you had several people who lived there, to pay the rent. A lot of people these days have reached out and been like, hey man, not everyone can be so lucky as to live in a temple and not have to pay for anything and just have everything given to them. It's like, oh boy, okay, we need to talk. Yeah. You want to know what it's like to, as a spiritual discipline, be told, like, especially in Portal, like that you have to sweep and mop 3,000 square feet every day for 6 months just for shits and giggles. Even if someone else is doing it for some other event, you still have to do it first. Or like, I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons with my friends on the mountains of North Vancouver, up where I Frater Ahad country, and it's like, oh, it's 10:30, get in my car, drive all the way downtown, hour of sweeping and mopping, whole thing, pitch black, no one's there, right? Drive back to my D&D game. Then if Heroes, so another way I could do it, I could do it from 11 till 12. Then this is if I had other plans or family events. Then I could from 12 till 1 do it again. So I could do it twice from 11 to 12, meet my discipline, which was fine. I was allowed to do that according to Very Own Frater BST. It was about the discipline, not about it's not that the place wasn't clean. It was like about me doing this discipline, and also a chance for people to see me, not just being some teacher person or in, officer robes on a dais, especially in the year and a half I was a veiled adept, right? Often outer order members don't know if someone's an adept until they're a hierophant, right? So that's it's a good thing to see, to have people do humbling work in that time, work that doesn't just look humbling but is humbling by the sheer extremity of it, whether it's cleaning or doing anything. There's lots of obedience or projects that I think can really help alchemy in a lot of ways. So
Yeah, and I mean, like
we had that hardcore zealot attitude about our own great work there. We didn't want to have anything handed to us. We didn't make things easy on ourselves ever. We always pushed hard, and I think that that's why it was such a good experience ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, and like everything that you're talking about, it's maddening. It's also very valuable, you know. And so it was, and it's like, I remember doing work like that, and it was, it's sort of like there were times where it would just kind of break your heart. You know what I mean? You were like, because it was just so, it can be like ego shattering,
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, it's like you get so much out of it. And then also there's an important grounding aspect to it, right? Like
we're talking Salve et Quaegio again. How do we get back here?
Right.
Shatter the ego, ground it down, reform it in a purer way. I mean,
yeah,
it happened to me so many times there, especially under BST as a mentor. Yeah, we were intense. So I'm glad you felt that when you were there. It was a cool place we had, in the heart of darkness of Vancouver. We definitely were the light in the darkness of that part of town. There's a restaurant there now. I look forward to going to it if ever they allow the unclean in. Somewhere in the future, someone like you were saying with Edward on the podcast about being an author and how sometimes things outlive you, whether you like it or not, when you're an author or do any writing. These podcasts also will probably outlive us. So I can imagine in the future someone watching this and being like, what does he mean? Why couldn't you go to a restaurant? Because he's unclean. And it's interesting historiography. I noticed this a lot in grad school when I was learning hermeneutics and that the interpretation methodologies that often we lose track of when we don't look at things in the right context with the right understanding. In the future, someone might not even know what we're talking about. I can imagine people in the future not knowing what we're talking about not being able to go into a restaurant or something like that. Like a lot of my friends can't go to movies now here anymore for whether it's religious reasons or they are trusting their doctors over the government. Whatever it is, there's a lot of people in that situation. So I wonder how this time will be viewed in the future. A little tangent there, but hey, I'm mercurial just like BT, so what can I say? Aquarius. We were in an Aquarius temple, hey, like founded by Nineveh Shadrach, who was a Virgo, and then we had the first adept was AMO, who was a Gemini, then BST Bull. You probably remember who these people are, hopefully, but if not, I'm not going to say it. Yeah, and then Bull was a Aquarius, of course. Then Martin, who now runs Zaleski's order, was Aquarius. Then I was an Aquarius, and then we had Karen, but she never stayed at Tutti. She went straight over to open a temple in Sweden, of course, with what's his name, SI. And then we had a Gemini and a Libra. So it was the adepts that came up to Hootie were that stayed. Karen was a Taurus, so she didn't stay. She couldn't have stayed. We don't want any earth signs at our temple. No, air or bust. Virgo, Gemini, Aquarius, Gemini, Libra. Those were the adepts of Temple Tahuti. Anyway, so maybe that was the part of the intensity, was all that air and Tiferet just like burning a hole in the place. So yeah, any other cool memories from the 99, or how long did you end up sticking around Pomsey after Tahuti closed in 2003,
Oh
4?
man. I honestly, I'm not sure offhand, like how many years I was there after 99. I mean, at least 5,
Oh yeah,
I'm
so
gonna
you were,
say,
yeah.
something like that.
Did you go through 5, 6 in the order?
Hmm.
Oh wow, yeah.
Hmm.
How was that a good experience?
Yeah, as good as it gets.
As good as it
Put it
gets?
that way.
Yeah, I mean, Tahuti, I closed Tahuti before the things got really crazy. I mean, we spoke out, right? We spoke out. We thought that maybe it would work and people would listen because of what was going on with you know who, with the he who shall not be named, was
Mhm.
so absurd. It's like, just let's toss this dude. He's just holding everyone back.
Yeah,
We thought that might be the case. That might be what happened, but that didn't happen, and so be it.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I haven't seen you since, so it's so cool to reconnect.
It is really
Obviously,
cool.
Canada rubbed off on you because you went ahead and translated a book from the 1700s in French. So
Yeah.
the Canadian en français clearly rubbed off on you. Or did you speak French before? You must have.
So okay, so my origin story when it comes to French translation is in high
Yes.
school. So actually, so I live in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, which is it's like this. It is a secret bastion of French Canada. Um, in the late 1800s, many Quebecois were brought here to work in the factories. And you know, there's still factory buildings everywhere. If you ever want to look it up in Woonsocket, there is a museum called the Museum of Work and Culture that that highlights the Quebecois migration and why it is that there's so many French Canadian descendants in Woonsocket. Anyway, I went to high school here, and I went to a Catholic high school, and there was an old folks home right next door. And in starting, it must have been my sophomore year, there was an option. You could take like the formal religion class, or you could do charity work, and it was up to you what you wanted to do. And the charity work actually sounded really great because I came from I come from a pious Catholic family, and so you know, I would learn all the same things over again in religion class, or so my sophomore self was thinking, or I could just do charity work, and charity work sounded great. So so I signed up for that, and it turned out to be reading to the elderly at the old folks home next door. So I went there, and the you know, I remember the very first lady that I read to, all her books were in French, and she spoke broken English, but she didn't have any English literature, right? And at the time, I was taking like this French 1 class, because the school also taught French, and so I had this like accelerated French education with this like 85-year-old French Canadian lady.
Wow.
And so that's why, you know, that's how I picked up reading French. And so for the next 3 years, like I went back and I would read to various elderly, and I got better and better at it. And for whatever reason, like they never expected me to converse with them in French. But they often would explain to me what everything meant that I was reading. And so that's how I initially, my first education in French was a translation education. And so, and it just, you know, it has always been a translation education.
Incroyable. Ouais. Damn, that's so cool. And so what? I know you talked a little bit about the book, your book, with Edward, but
Mhm.
before we dive into the weeds, maybe you can tell those people who only listen to the first 15 minutes of a podcast more about your book. because it is quite a cool little achievement,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
certainly not little. And I'm sure it's worth the $72 Ouroboros is charging for it. It looks like a beautifully done book, and I think they have a really good reputation. I don't know if they have the best. Who's the one that has the best reputation? Is it Anathema? Who's the one that's
That's a
always
good
getting
question. I mean,
praised?
I
There's a
guess it would
couple that are
depend on.
super high quality these days, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think Anathema has, I mean, there's a lot of them out there now. There's Anathema, there's Hadean Press, there's
Amen.
all kinds of things.
We live in
Um,
the best time to be magicians, probably since ancient Egypt, and probably still better than that, because let's face it, technology's sort of nice.
yeah. I mean, like right now I was just thinking about that in the last 5 years, I think I've delved heavily into Cypriana, I've gotten heavily into like Agrippan style astrological magic.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Are you
And like
excited
that,
about? Sorry, go ahead.
oh yeah. But my only point there is like things are basically at our fingertips right now.
Yeah.
Like you can just go and go and go. Yeah, exactly.
Now we got all the proper god forms for the initiations.
Right.
Well, we didn't, but until I mean, we didn't for a long time. Most people, I think, most orders use the neophyte god forms for all the initiations, because that's what Rigardi published. It wasn't till '94 that Zaleski put out the privately printed proper god forms for all the grades, and then
That's right. And it's so much richer
2010,
than
16 years later, he released those publicly in this. Um, you know, yeah. So, and orders can now use the proper god forms.
I sometimes feel like we're never. I feel like scholarship regarding the original Golden Dawn is still very much ongoing.
Well, until Fuller writes his masterpiece, I would like him to. I wish he had the time to do the definitive everything. Just like do a equinox size full everything that's proper and correct and historical, showing that the historical developments and variations. Because pretty much only Dr. Fuller, I think, in the GD world has the technical wherewithal to do that, as well as access to the documents. I mean, it's like what Skinner's done with so many grimoires in the Solomonic tradition. I mean, it means that a third of the books are probably a third of like techniques of Solomonic magic is just charts and tables of manuscript editions, but the rest of this, what that allowed him to be, the conclusions that allowed him to draw, are just so valuable, even though you have to put up with a bit of academia in the process of going through his book.
Yeah. I mean, it's and like that in my opinion, it's entirely worth it to get into the weeds with stuff like this, because you just draw so much fruit out of it. I mean, that being said, like that was probably a major impetus for translating the dictionary. It was a dictionary that was it's written by a guy named Dom Antoine Joseph Pernetti. He was a monk living in the 18th century, a monk, also, and obviously also a writer. If you ever look up his work, he has, I mean, it's just as much, he has like travel writing, he has alchemical writing. But what he was specifically interested in was this idea that he was almost an early synergist, because he was interested in the amalgamation of ideas. So
syncretist, you mean, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Did I say synergist?
That's a Stephen Covey thing.
Yeah, it's totally
that
different.
would be like I'm sure there's a joke there. Anyway, yeah, but it makes sense. Anyway, yeah. So he's an early syncretist, sort of the Lullian tradition, I guess, because Ramon Lull was quite a famous syncretist as well in the 1300s. Yeah.
He was into this idea that that Roman and Greek mythology had a reflection in alchemical process. And the longer I go along on this occult journey, the the more I could see why you would come to that conclusion.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you know, I was just reading, actually, there's another book that's published by Ouroboros Press. It's called Alchemy, the Poetry of Matter. And it's written by this fantastic alchemist by the name of Brian Cotnoir. And in it, he has a translation from the earliest form of the Emerald Tablet.
The Arabic. Eh?
Yeah, and
yeah.
he takes directly from the Arabic. And he points out that, like, right in the Emerald Tablet, it says, here, I can tell you exactly what it says because it's right sitting on my coffee table. His father is the sun and his mother is the moon. The wind carries it in her belly. The earth nourishes it. Father of talismans, treasure house of wonder, perfection of powers.
It says father of talismans.
It says father of talismans, and there's no hemming and hawing about that, because I mean it's
that's the Arabic word they use.
That's the Arabic word that they use. You know, and so there's this, even in a foundational document like the Emerald Tablet, it is it's both a magical and an alchemical text at the same time. So you see the syncretism like way early. And so I could see why Pernetti would come up with an idea like this. Anyway, he draws out this idea in what's considered to be his masterwork, which is the Greek and Egyptian Fables Unveiled. It's this enormous encyclopedic work where basically he goes through Roman mythology and like all various forms of Greek mythology. So not only the Olympian pantheon, but also the he starts to talk about the characters from the Trojan War. There's a lot of different aspects of classical mythology that he gets into, and for all of these different characters and all of these different stories, he relates all of them to various alchemical processes. Basically, he takes the alchemical concepts of fermentation, albification, and rubification, right? The black, the white, and the red, and relates it to mythology. The work that I did is actually, it's from this vast appendix to the Greek and Egyptian Fables Unveiled. And it's this, so it's a vast appendix, but it's actually a shortened, more compact version of his multi-volume work, right? Okay. So the dictionary doesn't have Pernetti like going on at length about this stuff. He's a little less wordy in the dictionary. And so yeah, that's
what you did.
That's what I did. That's a précis to it.
Amazing. Yeah. What a thing to put out there. Thank you.
Sure.
I look forward to checking it out, and it's still available from Ouroboros for people who want to go get it. When did it come out?
So it came out.
Is it a few years ago?
Yeah, 2000. I want to say 2019, but 2018, 2019. Very recently.
Sometime between 68 and 70. What are you working on? Something else a new book?
So there's so many projects that are all
busy summoning spirits.
They're not, I mean, that's just one project among many, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things, so I mentioned a keen interest in astrological magic.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm working on is so I'm kind of working on this like extensive, deep review of 3 books of occult philosophy.
Yeah, are you excited about the Eric Purdue?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because it's
apparently it's on the watch list for like the FBI or CIA or something.
Cool.
Yeah.
Why?
Someone warned me of that. Probably something to do with, you know, the Lucifer Refical teen slayings in England by E.A. Quetting's follower, that 18-year-old kid who killed those two girls. I mean,
Oh,
occult
so
crimes have caused some international stir now. So like this kid went and killed those two girls specifically because of the things E.A. Quetting suggested he do on live streams and channels. And I checked out a couple of his live streams and I was like skeptical. And it's like, oh no, he totally does recommend hurting and killing people to make
uh-oh.
pacts with it. He absolutely calls for you to do violence against others because if it's your will, and it's just repulsive shit. Yeah.
Yeah. I
So that would probably cause a few books to go on the list so they can keep track of who reads them, like, you know, full Seven style, like that. That's how they catch the guy in Seven, right? They see
oh right, yeah.
what's that wonder? What's that black actor with the really grating voice that no one likes to listen to? Oh, what's his name actually? What is his name? Come on, he plays God all the time.
Morgan Freeman.
Yeah, Morgan Freeman. Yeah,
Yeah.
isn't he in that?
Yeah.
He's the one who figures it out, right? He finds out in Seven who's checking out these books. He gets it back. You know, the libraries aren't meant to give out that information, but they give it to him. He can cross-reference who's checking out these specific texts. It goes to the guy's address, and they find his home. So
I
I
haven't
guess
seen it in a long time and I don't remember. So therefore,
you only need to see it once.
you're probably right.
Anyway, it's pretty hardcore.
I actually have I have something to say about the approach of murdering people for occult advancement. But we can
Don't
talk
do
about
it. It doesn't work. That's not what it's about. I don't know. I can think of a lot of things to say about that.
yeah. Well, okay. I mean,
I don't think it's
the
going to
thing
advance you in any way, except into
no, I mean
hell or some
that's
tormented.
that's basically where I wanted to go was just
Yeah.
that like if you were so okay, so there are some it's debatable as to whether this is a good idea, but there are some things that darker powers are capable of that other powers may not be. So whether they're capable of it or not, they're not famous for it. And those darker powers, like they don't, the concept of sin to me is a human one, right? Where these darker powers, they're not, I have yet to meet, and you could disagree because this is a hotly, I'm sure that this can be a hotly debated thing. But for all the darker powers that I have ever met, I have never met one that had in mind the destruction of my soul. They're there, they're hanging out. They're, and it is possible to negotiate with them. And the way that things go may not be very much to your liking, but they have nothing personally against you or for you. So to appease them by murdering people, it's just not going to work because they don't really care about whether you murder somebody or not. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, well,
I wasn't expecting to get into such dark territory, but
you haven't listened much to my podcast. Yeah, well, I don't even know if you knew I existed or was out there. Until I saw your face on Edward's podcast, I was like, "Who's Joe Zabinski? Do I know him?" Edward was asking me, and then I saw your face. I was like, "Oh yeah, I remember you." That guy.
I totally know that guy.
Yeah, we had good times together. I don't think we ever got to spend as much time together back in the day as I would have liked. Or as we would have liked. And that was the case with most people. I mean, to this day, I never got to spend as much time, especially when you get higher up in an order. You're so busy keeping it going and running it and making sure things happen that you don't have as much time to hang out. And it's like it's like Creed Bratton says on The Office, I've been a member of a number of cults, both as a leader and as a follower. You make more money as a leader, but you have more fun as a follower. So maybe I should have just stayed in the lower grades longer and just had a good time with all the awesome people that I met. Because I've
Yeah,
never to this day been a part of anything that had a cooler group of people, that a more interesting and more lovely group of
yeah.
people. The bad eggs were few and far between in my experience,
Mm-hmm.
and didn't
Mm-hmm.
stick around long because they were like, oh, I don't really fit in with these nice folks.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
if
I mean,
you want to get up to like some fucked up shit, it's like
mhm.
people around you aren't going to cheer that on at all,
Right.
at all.
Right.
So you're not gonna really have much commonality there if that's what your thing is.
I think that really speaks to when I think a big reason why so after I left the order, like I became very much I became so solo that I became like very isolated. Um and I think a big reason why I became so isolated was just because I was in mourning for losing so many friends, you know.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think that but I mean, like, looking back on it, I mean, I think that the reality was that I never lost I never lost any friends. It was just that when you left something like this order, this is how you were expected to behave. You were expected to just like kind of fall off the face of the earth. Um
that was all. Yeah, that was one of those many bad things to do with zinc. I mean,
mhm,
my mom and sister, for example, were considering leaving to join Martin's order, and zinc, tried to pull that thing where he's like, well, if they do, you can never talk to them again. And I was like, okay, this is fucked. And
right.
that was the beginning of the end for the Canadian affiliation with the American order, because we just weren't, we didn't have to deal with a lot of that stuff most of the time because we were up in Canada doing our own thing. And even if we were, even if some bad recommendations came down the chain, we could just not follow them and no one would know. It's like, who wants to go up to fucking Canada? But when Zink lived in Seattle, he was closer, and I was going
Mhm.
there a lot often to rewrite. I rewrote all the grade material up through Theoricus. It never got released because Tahuti left, I left, and I was demonized, of course. So those really beautifully rewritten grade books that I did never got off his computer, unfortunately. I did a lot of work on that. I would have loved to finish it. At least then, when they all got leaked onto the internet, they would have been slightly higher quality, right? Right now, when I look at those old grade materials, it's like I have to cross out half the stuff in them because it's like slightly wrong or really wrong.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, a lot of the stuff isn't, of course, but you'd have to, if you don't know, I wouldn't rely on that material. I mean, anyway.
Mhm.
Yeah, so yeah, the whole losing everyone was really rough, yeah, losing your
Mhm.
family, losing your friends, and yeah, that was the sign that things were going a bad way. So yeah, so too bad they didn't get rid of him when it was really obvious back in '03 that they should have.
Well, I mean, if it was the sort of thing where it was like people were such zealots, right? We were so, because I mean this was the sort of outlet where if you wanted to make a spiritual discipline out of mopping the floor, you had a family who supported you in that, right? We supported each other in some pretty freaking extreme behavior, you know, extreme in a good way. I think that all of us experienced tremendous spiritual growth in each other's company. Um,
Yeah,
but with that comes, um, you know, with the willingness to go to extreme sorts of behavior, there's also this willingness to put up with a lot of things that are unhealthy for you to put up with, you
yeah,
know, all because you don't want to all because you don't want to damage your relationship with the rest of your spiritual family, um and also b, because you're trying to approach this with as little ego as you can, right? Like, you know, there's so much humility to it. And even when you're seeing, you know, even when you're seeing like blatant crimes being committed, you don't want to step in the way, because you're too humble to step in the way. You know, until you hit a point, until you're pushed to an edge and you can't get away from that edge anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know I vanished like you did and was very focused on myself for a while. I worked with a close friend and did some more magic with my sister for a few years after Tahuti closed, but then went full on into bardic pursuits in Ireland and
Oh, really?
doctoral studies. Oh yeah. Actually, Dr. Tony Fuller, and I had the same doctoral mentor, the same Dr. Fata, Nicholas Goodrick Clark at
Wow.
Exeter.
Okay.
But I was based over in the UK in Belfast and Ireland and touring a lot, right? So I was part-time, and then Nicholas died, and then I got sick at the same time. So it was like never finished that. But it's cool that I had, if I had gone to actually the campus, if I decided to go on campus for it, which doesn't really make that much sense when you're doing a research PhD, which most of them were pretty much, no classes. But if I had been on campus, I would have been around Dr. Fuller and actually encountered him back in like 05 to 09. So it's sometimes I wonder if I did the wrong thing. But at the same time, I got to become a bard and learn all the instruments and play music. I play uilleann pipes, low whistle, high whistle, Irish flute, 8-string lute, 15, 21-string Renaissance round back, guitar, bass, a lot of stuff, and done tons of albums, learned how recording and sound engineering and touring works. Like, yeah. So that was cool, and it definitely sort of led me back into the Celtic mysteries and that whole magical world. That was my doorway back into the Hermetic stuff. So yeah, that's been my journey.
Okay.
Now we're fully caught up.
Yeah, that's right. Now we know everything.
Yeah. Throw in a divorce, terminal illness, failed degree, and many years touring with a band. That's the last 20 years. There you go.
So where are you now?
In Vancouver. Yeah, I was in California teaching for 14 months up until COVID, and then stuck there for a while, and then I got myself back to Canada on the one day they said they would let me pass through the border without going into one of those COVID jail hotels that they like to throw people into, rob and rape them. Go Canada. Like, I'm sorry, man, I wish it wasn't true, but it's true. And so, we got to mention that stuff, so maybe when it happens again, people are like, actually, no, we're not going to do that. So you've been involved in Cyprianic stuff.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. I'm very curious about that. It seems to be all the rage.
It does seem to be all the rage, which is why I first became curious in it in the first place. Just because it was like this, it was something that I didn't know anything about, and I was like, well, why are people so into this? So
I'd love it if you could tell me. I mean,
so
Jason Miller just sent out an email blast called "Summon Demons with Church Things," I believe.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. No wonder the Catholic Church is probably petitioning the CIA to put us all on watch lists.
Okay, so all right. Have you ever worked with a saint before?
Oh yeah.
Okay, great. So a lot of people, and I don't know whether you agree with me on this, but a lot of people find that with saints, they were once living human beings like yourself, and so they have a perspective that isn't easily come by. When you work with so I mean the biggest thing that I can compare it to is with angels. I don't know about you, but a lot of the time I find that when I'm working with angels, they have it's a wonderful thing to work with angels.
It's my preference.
They have this almost, sometimes it feels so foreign, and it feels so almost, they almost feel like androids, or they just feel very not of this world. I'll put it that way.
I like the android word, actually.
Okay.
It makes, since COVID, let's be less specific. I've gotten a lot in the recent years into some ritual entheogenic exploration, especially with DMT and things like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of stuff's legal in Canada: peyote,
Oh, sure.
5-MeO, all those sort of things. We have 3 mushroom dispensaries on this street I live on now.
Whoa.
Yeah, and so like now the prices are dropping. You can get like the super psychedelic mushrooms here for like way less than you used to, because we have so many. There's like 20 dispensaries probably in Vancouver now for mushrooms that opened up in the last few months. Yeah, get kombucha infused. It's crazy. Tea bags.
Wow.
This is the Wonderland is next door. It's like Alice in Wonderland design. Everyone's like, what do they sell there? And you go and you're like, are they fucking selling mushrooms? It's like, yes, they are. They're like, yes, and they have every kind you can imagine in tea bags and chocolate and vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free chocolate, like everything, all the stuff. It's like, yeah.
That's amazing.
Trudeau's found the answer to staying in power forever. Just go full on Brave New World, drug up the population, and we'll be too stoned and psychedelic out to ever dethrone him.
That's the secret. A lot of drugs.
Isn't that is the Brave New World thing, right? And it's versus 1984 is like they're going to control us through the truth thing and like right speak, and Brave New World is they control us through drugging us up, right?
I think so.
We clearly learned how to combine the two quite well so far, so we're gonna probably see more of that.
Yeah. So, but you were saying that you were working with entheogens
in those realms, because they appear so much more physically to you, especially in something like DMT. You get a fuller perhaps spectrum of whatever these beings are. And I'm not a subscriber to the argument that it's all happening just inside your head, with the chemicals, that the drugs are just the chemicals, which is something I know. It's probably one of the only areas where I sort of disagree with David Heimsmith, because he thinks it limits to your head. I do believe that psychedelics and entheogens are not the same doorway that you find in magical and spiritual traditions sometimes. I do think, if anything, it's more like the pineal gland's a doorway into the macro. But if the science hasn't figured that out yet, for example, here's an interesting thought experiment. So like David Heimsmith, if he's right, then he's right. But if science comes along, is like, okay, no, these things are objectively there. We're just can't experience them without this key to this doorway in our brain. But once that key is put in that lock, whether it's through DMT or peyote or whatever it is, then we're in that realm. We're somewhere else. It's something else. We do know it's like beyond our head. The science might discover that. We might discover that sometime in the future.
Sure.
I mean, I'm sure I think they already think that's what it is. Otherwise, I don't know why they would be doing extended state DMT experiments, putting people down for 8 hours, and then going back to this, finding ways to go back to the same realm so different people can go to the same place, talk to the same being, which they have been doing for a long time. It's just sort of hush hush. I mean, it's a little bit too mind blowing to really announce to the public yet, I think.
Yeah.
But they seem more android-like is the point. Have their programming. They come across in this sort of interesting way, and they really don't seem to like technology from my experiences, though that could just be certain beings in certain realms.
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing I've definitely found with with working with angels is one, it's really interesting, because it's like there's this part of you that just becomes ecstatic, and it's not just because, hey, I contacted something. It's due to the presence of the angel. They lift you up tremendously as just by them being there, and in my opinion, that's probably one of the biggest reasons to work with angels, is because like you get this, it's almost like a radiation that raises you. Working with them in a magical sense to get something done. I have always found that angels, like, will they get it done? Probably, eventually. They're going to be very gentle about it, and they're going to be, and everything is going to work out for everybody. That's what I've found. When it works at all, it will work gently. Okay, so there's my experience on angels.
And when you
with
say angels
saints-
there, just a quick one, would
Yeah.
would you include like more slightly quote unquote chthonic angels, like maybe the Enochian ones? Or are you talking more of archangels, higher angels?
Oh,
Because a lot of people would also class spirits and intelligences as angels.
oh, sure.
Since,
Yeah, I mean, I think Enochian angels start to get really weird, right? So
I think it's because they're in Malkut. I think they're Yetzir, like in the Yetzirah of Malkut. That's a one placement that would sort of make sense. Like they're chthonic, terrestrial, and just, you know, they're there, right, help making reality and influencing individual little decisions. Like they have very, especially the smaller spirits, have very precise things that they can do, it seems.
Yes, right. But they still the interesting thing is they still have this like weird, like, I don't have another word for it other than like radiation or radiatory aspect to them. So bigger, so like archangels like Michael, like Raphael, they have that, a lot of it. And when you work with them, once you get close to them, once you sense them, you'll experience that. Enochian angels also have that, and the trick is with Enochian angels that you can use that. So and you can use their radiatory aspect by itself, where all they need to do is just be there in the right circumstances, and you can change the atmosphere, or you can change the charge of whatever it is you're doing. So for example, a good way to, so there's a back door to zodiacal forces. The back door is to, or I'm sure there's lots of back doors, but there's a back door to zodiacal energy. The front doors to zodiacal stuff is just to invoke the zodiacal force directly. The back door is to bring in an element generally, right? So let's say that like you're looking to invoke Sagittarius, for example, you would first bring in fire, and then you would, if you're going to do it the Golden Dawn way, then you would you would use what's done in the Philosophus initiation to bring in fire. After that, you go to
do the great opening.
Yeah. After that, you go to there's a specific, so there's 3 kings, right, for each tablet. Each king can be associated with a particular zodiacal force. I don't know if this is written down or not, but there's cardinal, fixed, and mutable for each of the kings. In other words, King 1 is cardinal, King 2 is fixed, etc. So what you do from there is you pray to whoever the king is, whose force you're interested in, and just that, or you pray to God through the Enochian angel. So, and when you do that prayer brings in the presence of that Enochian king specifically. So what happens is like that king, since he's part of the cardinal sign of fire, or if it's Sagittarius, the mutable sign of fire, just him coming in, his presence, since you've already invoked fire, you transform that whole temple into a Sagittarian temple because that Enochian king is present. So it's just that, like that, just that power of radiation you can use it with angels to tweak your work.
Yeah, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I'm sure Tabby must talk about that in her relatively new Enochian book that she's put out. She must cover
Oh,
all
she
of those
probably does.
nuances of the GD
Yeah.
methodology, because that's what that stuff is. Yeah. No, I've been working now for last well, since doing Jason Newcomb's masterclass, where I got to some exposure to both Scott Michael Stenwick and also Aaron Leach teaching the purist method. I've been since then, since COVID, exploring the purest method of Enochian magic or angelic magic, and it's
Oh,
been very
sweet.
interesting. Yeah, we've been doing a lot. I mean, like, this was the first sigil that we made, and you stand on the sigils, right? You stand on them while you're working with it. It's the only grimoire in history where you stand on the sigil of the
Hmm.
spirit you're invoking. So this is it's got some markings on it from my feet, of course, but there you go for Karmara and Hagenel. And of course,
Cool.
Aaron Leach would have the Venus edition there, but that's again, you can there's variations and debates that are unsettled, therefore leaving room to play. Like the coloring there, I did based on my connection, asking questions of Karmara and Hagenel. Of what
Nice.
colors,
Mhm.
because they're the king of king and prince of princes of the heptarchial system, and not explicitly really determined by the colorings of the planet and day. They rule over
Mhm.
all of them, and therefore can be called anytime. Did another operation with a friend on Friday with them, and then on Sunday one for Bornago and the Sunday King. And yeah, it's an
Wow.
interesting thing to do, the purist system. It's a lot of praying, and it's
Yeah.
but it's also fun to be able to tell my students, like, when they say, oh, after we did it, I forgot to do a LBRP that night. It's like, yeah, that's fine. Neither did D. What are you
Yeah.
worrying about?
Right. Right.
I mean, this is, you can bring in that stuff into the purist approach, like, and working on some fusions and seeing some effective crossovers with Golden Dawn methodology and purist methodology is something I'm exploring, because again,
Mhm.
we're sort of results oriented, right?
Yeah.
As pure magicians and not sort of religionist, ideological magicians.
Mhm.
We want to see what we can do with it, and
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
so yeah, that's some interesting stuff.
Um,
Lots of prayers, lots of praying to
yes.
Jesus. So listen up, EA Quetting, who thinks it's a black magic system and they're evil angels just disguised as good angels by D to hide them from the church. Nonsense. The Enochian system in its pure angelical form, as I like to say, runs on Jesus juice. So
Mhm.
if you can't play nice with Christ, even in the context of that system, sincerely, it's probably not for you.
Yeah.
There's lots of other magical
Interesting.
systems that aren't actually explicitly fueled by Jesus Christ, but Enochian magic is one of them. You
Mm.
can't go on all Dr. Skinner on it and be like, oh, these prayers were added later. No.
Right. Jesus was there from the get-go with that one.
And when we talk about safety with these things, like you brought up earlier, I think the prayers are the safeguards, because, like,
Mhm.
if people say Enochian magic is dangerous, my only thought is like, well, not in my experience, ever in my experience, and I've been doing this stuff since the early 90s.
Yeah.
And but I am pretty sure that if every night before you went to bed you rang a bell, lit a candle, and recited both the Enochian calls, just them, and said, I summon all spirits, and went to bed, I'm pretty sure shit might get fucked up for you.
Yeah,
If that's
probably.
all you did, if you just
Right.
did that, yeah, you're probably just becoming a playground of forces you cannot control, as we used to say.
Right. Yeah. And I think like that's honestly what you just said. That's the only thing that I've ever seen in the occult that's been like, just working different systems, exploring the results from all of those systems, blah blah blah. The only thing that could be considered dangerous was just you get into some really mind-bending states. And if you're not, and if you have like, you know, if you have any mental health problems, um, you could run. Yeah, I could see how you could run into some issues.
Oh yeah, magic is. I think I've never heard anyone say that magic is a good idea if you have imbalances in brain chemistry or mental health. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure you could. work it cautiously, but I would definitely, I think you definitely would want to be doing it in consultation with a therapist that understands the kind of things you're doing. Because we often are intentionally shattering our minds, or to use Lon Duquette's saying that, you know, the purpose of summoning a demon is to cause a nervous breakdown. I mean, that's a highly psychological model, of course, but we all get his point, right? We all get his point, right?
Yeah.
We work with things to unearth the the dross in our being that needs to be, you know, purified and improved, which is why, again, I say that, like, why you'll find initiates, those who do magic, and the initiatory path, because the two are not synonymous, um, constantly dealing with greater and greater challenges that seem almost absurd to the average person who avoids challenges and seeks happiness and joy and abundance, right? You know, just they want to have, most people just want to have a happy, fun life, I guess. But, you know, magicians are like, hey, I'm doing really well. Let's see what sort of shit we can stir up and work within ourselves that I might not even be aware I have within me, because I'm still alive. I'm still imperfect. We're always forever sinners. Let's see what, you know, we're just digging deeper and deeper into our own, the depths of our own being, to
Right. Yeah.
to unmask more and more those vestiges of the false self and see the true.
Yeah. You're like totally, yeah. Yeah. That's exactly why. That's exactly why. It's because and it's like this, you have to dig, you have to continue to transform. You have
Yeah.
to continue to transform. And like the main thing that has kept me in magic so hard for so long is that I just want to understand. I want to understand what I am, who I am. I want to, but more importantly, I want to understand what's happening around me. I want to understand the world and my place in it. Like it's that basic.
Yeah.
I still don't feel like I completely understand.
I should hope not. Hey, for, you know, we see only in part, but when the fullness comes, you know, that line from St. Paul is just pretty dead on, really.
Mm.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was an adaptation of an earlier mystery teaching that was co-opted.
Yeah.
Hey, so yeah, I guess the one other thing you don't know that I was doing, probably because I guess you were still in the outer order when I was running Tahuti in those last 2 years, and having to do everything. I went into seminary, and I went through
Oh, okay.
seminary. I got my master's in divinity
Wow.
in 2006. I finished it in 2005, and for the Episcopal Church, or Anglican Church as we call it
Oh,
in
really?
Canada. Yeah, I was trained in the at St. Augustine's Anglican by Reverend Graham Brownlee, a Welshman, and had good, you know, I was there in a alb every Sunday giving sermons to the Anglican Church and doing spiritual direction for old people and young people. I was the director of youth ministries for a while, and, you know, but then I went off to Europe to the doctor. So that was that I felt was giving me the necessary skill sets that I didn't get in a magical order, going
Sure.
through seminary, a mainstream one, as
Mhm.
well as allowed me. I got to learn Hebrew and Aramaic, which was
Wow.
fucking awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm,
And
yeah.
useful. I
Yeah,
mean,
very useful. Reading the Zohar is very useful. Yeah, I didn't end up doing much of that in the following years, but it was a
mhm,
great education for sure. Yeah.
mhm. So
Yeah.
you asked about Cipriano before, and I got
Yeah.
off. I
Yeah.
I
Well, you
always do
mentioned, you
this
asked if
with.
I had worked with saints, and I was like, oh shit, this guy, I should tell this guy where what my education is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Have I worked with saints? A little bit, a little bit. Then that's why I'm so curious about Saint Cyprian, and what's your
Sure.
take on the whole rage around him, and what's that magic like?
Okay, with saints, right? They're a little bit more. They're more down to earth than angels, right? So when you're working with saints, they have a tendency to be able to meet you at your level. Um, and to be able to give you advice that's a little bit, for lack of a better word, just a little bit more human, and a little bit more practical a lot of the time. So anyway, that's why like, that's one of the reasons why I became interested in like saints generally. And then there's Saint Cyprian. So do you know the story of Saint Cyprian?
A little bit, but I'm sure many listeners have never heard of him. So
Okay, so there's like, I don't know how to put it, maybe the more official legend, and then there's the more unofficial legend. The official legend goes something like this: that Cyprian was trained as a pagan magician, right? So part of the legend is that he went to these various places throughout the classical Roman Empire, and was trained in what are known now as the dark arts, right? So he learned of necromancy, he learned of astrology, he learned of talisman making, and he became a very well educated pagan magician. Well, he goes to I don't remember the city that he goes to, but he goes to a city, I believe, in Turkey. And he meets
it wasn't Antioch, was it?
Yes, it was Antioch. Yeah, it was Antioch.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah. So he goes.
There's that seminary for you, baby.
So he goes to Antioch, and he meets this woman, whose name is, why can't I remember her name? I think about her all the time. Justina, of course. He meets a woman named Justina, and Justina is a Christian woman. And Cyprian decides that, well, there's variations on the legend. Either Cyprian decides that he wants to get with Justina sexually, or somebody comes to him, a client comes to him and asks him to bind Justina to the client. So in either case, Cyprian performs some lustful magic towards Justina, right? And he's known as this powerful magician, and his magic goes nowhere. Like, Justina just like shuts him down completely and easily. She just like, nope, gone. And so with this failure, he, as many magicians do, when you fail, you ask yourself why you failed, and you try to understand that. And so he goes to Justina and he says, "How did you shut me down?" And she tells him, "Because I'm a Christian." And he says, "Okay, well, teach me of this Christ, because obviously you're a more powerful magician than I am." And so Justina starts to teach him about Christ, and Cyprian eventually becomes a bishop. The official legend is that he is eventually martyred with Justina. Specifically, he is boiled alive.
Yeah.
I think the two of them are together. And that's how they become martyrs. Okay, so there's your official legend of Saint Cyprian.
Now what really happened?
So the unofficial legend.
What's his version of the story?
So Cyprian, so as you can see, like, Cyprian already, he's already in this weird world, right? He's already in this twilight state, because he's a Christian bishop. He's also a pagan magician. So he's crossing the lines between pagan and Christian, right? Also, he's a martyr, and he's also a martyr, and he's a pagan magician, something that is frowned on in the church. So the unofficial story is that after Cyprian passed away, he was a martyr and he was a saint. He was made a saint, as saints are, but the job that he got after he passed away was to become, since he was such a good liaison between all of these different forces, he became the liaison between the forces of heaven and the forces of hell. So he became this figure that sort of stands at the edge of hell, right? Where he has great rapport and great negotiatory skills with hellish powers, and yet he's a saint. So he's a wonderful saintly magician to work with, because he is supporting your Christian being. He's supporting your Christian self. The dude's a Christian martyr, right?
Yeah.
But also he has access to hellish powers that no other, as far as I know, no other saint has access to. So he has this, so it's sort of like he has this weird, he has an unusual amount of authority, and he has an unusual amount of access. And that's,
and he's still considered a Catholic saint, eh?
I think he.
I should have chosen that as my confirmation name.
Cyprian.
Seen what and watched
That
the Archbishop's expression.
Yeah.
No, I went with Ignatius.
Oh, okay.
As a lover of, the techniques. I was growing up. I was a big fan of what's it called? What are they called? The techniques. I'm totally forgetting the name of exercises, spiritual exercises of.
Oh, that Ignatius.
Yeah. Well, actually, since you need two names, I actually used both Ignatiuses, including. So one of my Catholic names was Ignatius of Antioch. One's Ignatius de Loyola, because you need two as an adult when you go through the rite of Christian initiation for adults.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I forgot about a lot of this stuff. My one of the names I chose was Teresa.
Oh, beautiful.
Saint Teresa
Of Avila.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
mm-hmm. and then the other one I cheated. I just took Joseph.
Nice. Nice. I love interior castles. I still actually want to put together a whole course taking people through interior castles. Like I did a miniature of course of St. John of the Cross's Dark Night of the Soul, of course, focused on the sins and the path tunnel demons. But I'd like to do a whole interior castles thing, because she really, the way she describes, well, if anyone is interested, read Interior Castles by St. Teresa of Avila. And yeah, if you're familiar with Kabbalah or you've done much spiritual journeying at all, you're going to be like, oh, this person knows what they're talking about. They just are using some different metaphors and analogies. But the journey is very much the same. And that's why I think Dark Night of the Soul resonates with so many people, even though they misuse the term, technically speaking, from how John of the Cross uses it. Mm-hmm. But very interesting stuff. So
I mean, if you put together a course like that, I would totally take that course.
Boom.
I mean, that sounds like, yeah. That sounds amazing.
It'd have to be one day. I've got a lot on my plate for the next few years, but yeah, that's something I always thought would be a good one to really dive into again. I took copious notes while I was reading it, but mainly it helped me a lot spiritually reading it through Practicus and Portal. Yeah. And Practicus Lost World. I just read it over those grades because anyway, it was good.
Yeah, I could totally see that.
So the Cyprian, did he leave behind any grimoires?
Okay, so that gets,
why is everyone, what's the rage about now? Now we know, now I know the story.
It's infinitely deep, this stuff. Well, not infinite, you know what I mean? Like it just goes and goes and goes and goes. So historically, Saint Cyprian has been has kind of been like a go-to guy for grimoires in the Portuguese tradition and grimoires in the Spanish tradition. So I don't even know how many grimoires in Portuguese that involve Saint Cyprian. these grimoires have been adapted and adopted in Brazil, where they've mixed with, I could be wrong about this. No. I'm pretty sure this is true, that Cyprian has come to be embraced in things like Kimbanda. And yeah, and then there's also a crossover with a lot of like Spanish stuff. So it's been sort of in the last few decades, there's been like a big expansion of the grimoires that are generally available to the English reader, right? And these Cyprianic grimoires have come along and have like sort of like come to the forefront. So that's sort of like how Saint Cyprian like kind of ties in with just like stuff happening in the modern occult world. And I think like that's a big part of why he's so popular at the moment. Only because there's been a lot of stuff that's come out that just highly involves Cyprian.
So obviously a lot of the magical writings are pseudonymous and just attributed to him, but weren't written by him. And that's what a lot of, so I'm sort of curious about like, what's the sort of, because I think Jason Miller teaches that heavily now, and a few other people, though no names come to mind off the top of my head, are teaching that stuff. So yeah, I guess I was just sort of curious if you have some idea of what their magic looks like operationally, and what their methodology is for that kind of
thing. So I mean, a lot of it is, so I mean, it depends on where you go. Like sometimes you're going to get like heavily involved with the grimoires themselves, and it's just going to be like a presentation of that grimoire and how to work with it. But there's others out there that teach a more, so it gets really interesting because there are others that have like a more devotional approach, because he's a saint, right? So you can work with Saint Cyprian the way that you would work with any saint, right? So you can pray novenas to Saint Cyprian. You can have novena candles to Saint Cyprian. And that actually happens a lot in like in Brazilian circles and in Mexican circles. You'll have you'll have like you'll have a Catholic devotional approach to Saint Cyprian. And a lot of the time that devotional approach is like pretty much like used like sort of exclusively at first to enable a relationship with Saint Cyprian, right? So at first, and like I was just gonna say like as with many saints, you can develop a devotion to this saint, right?
Yeah.
Unlike other saints, Saint Cyprian is a well of knowledge, right? And so what happens is, as you develop a devotion to Saint Cyprian, he will start to teach you things. This is where it starts to get awesome, because you can establish a relationship with the saint who's also a magician. So what happens is like, you can start to, well, first off, like the first thing that comes to mind that happened with me was Saint Cyprian started to approach me. He started to approach me in dreams, and he started to approach me in waking times. So I mean, the dreams were like completely crazy. Like, I have no idea why, but well, I have some idea why, but like when you do devotional work with Saint Cyprian, like your dreams just go nuts. But then the other thing that started to happen was like, like really, really strange coincidences started to happen. Like I'd have a dream about something, or I'd have a dream of like the number 5, and then all of a sudden, like everything in the world is happening at like 5:55, and yeah. So so as you develop your devotion with Saint Cyprian, he begins to reciprocate. Once he begins to reciprocate, everything I've seen with Cyprian has been this negotiation. Like negotiation is sort of like the foundation of his magic. You negotiate a relationship with Cyprian, and once he's there, and you're going to know he's there, like once he's there, you can start to ask him questions, especially if you're a magician already. If you're a magician already, like, it's fantastic. If you're not a magician already, it's harder because he doesn't have anything to work with. But if you're a magician already, you can approach him about specific magic that you're doing, and he can give you recommendations on how to improve that magic.
Awesome.
Especially how to improve your relationship with specific spirits. And those spirits don't need to be so he's, he has the keys to hell, right? So he is known as having this like awesome relationship with hellish powers, right? And if you want to go that direction, by the way, he's fantastic. But it doesn't have to be hellish powers. It can be something like, I want to establish a relationship with the tree spirit in my backyard. How do I do that, Cyprian? And he can hook you up. Nice. Or also like I have trouble working with, maybe you have trouble working with archangels. No problem. He can help you to gain access to archangels too. Yeah. So it's like, so he's just sort of like this, he's kind of this like jack of all trades when it comes to that sort of thing.
I admit you've kind of sold me on Saint Cyprian. Well done. I mean, I always sort of thought of Albertus Magnus as the saint of magic in my personal life and practice, though I never worked closely with him in any specific way. But this Cyprian, it sounds, would you say Cyprian is got something so he's got something on Albertus? Good old Al.
You know what, like, it depends on what you're after, like, I think I've never worked with Albertus. That's actually a great idea.
I can see a comparative study, that'd be a fascinating actually book, a book where a really good scryer magician or evoker did chapter after chapter alternating, working with each of Albertus Magnus and Cyprian, and then released all of those conversations and stuff. It would have to be someone with a lot of experience so that they could ask questions related to different techniques and different experiences and stuff in a wide variety, right? You'd want that. That would be a very interesting project for any of us who I do like those books that magicians put out where they share the results of their work, like John R. King stuff. It's really interesting. I mean, I learned a lot from him. For example, when he does money magic, he doesn't put the specification and make sure that this harms no one on the way. He puts the specification, may this harm no one that I love, which led me with the people I work with to when we recently just did a heptarchial working on Sunday. Before everyone did their own charges for their working, I made a general charge that the operation would harm none, period. Because from John King's phrasing of harm none that I love, I was like, that probably would make your ritual slightly more liable to be successful, but I don't think I would want the karma that would come along with anyone being hurt just because I don't love them. And also, like, as an initiate, and John R. King's a goetic magician who is not he doesn't show any signs of interest in any sort of initiatory spirituality magic, and therefore has no qualms with, we're meant to love everyone. Initiates are sort of mystics in a way, magicians and mystics, I sometimes think. So you certainly can be an initiate without being a mystic, that's for sure. We got many examples of that, unfortunately. But the mystic has to love everybody. If you don't love everybody, I'm almost quoting Jerry Maguire now by accident. If you don't love everybody, you can't sell anybody. Oh God. Our old guru is always in my head. Frater, you're slipping off the path. You're backsliding, Frater.
Oh man. Hey, you want to hear something funny?
Yeah, man.
My wife recently became a life coach.
Oh, brilliant. I have some friends whose husbands don't have jobs. They're all life coaches. It's true. I'm not even joking. It's like, so your wife works a lot? Yeah, I'm all just here at the pub. What do you do? I'm a life coach. No, I'm joking. But yeah, life coach is what's that entail with her? Because it's a similar, I think, very similar to the training I got as a spiritual director in seminary. These are not psychologically based methodologies that are used to help people primarily, right? With the spiritual
Right.
director,
Right.
my thing is to be able to help identify someone's background and where someone wants to go, and then help direct them to the right sort of traditions, prayers, practices that would be good for them on their path.
Oh,
Not
sure.
like helping them understand the right way to be a Christian. Fuck no, that's not what spiritual
Right.
directors do. We're trained to be interdisciplinary and multi-denominational, because often spiritual directors with Masters of Divinity or MA in spiritual direction are hired at different denominations. Anywhere you get, I mean, you go where you get the job, right? And you're there to direct people spiritually. And it's very useful in churches, the ones that do have a budget for a spiritual director, to have someone who can counsel parishioners from a non-sectarian, sort of non-denominational way, because that person might need help that is and guidance that is not within the realm of their denomination, or even the culture of that particular parish that they're, or congregation they're a part of. And having someone who can give just human advice is a very useful thing. Obviously, not all churches are into this idea, but most of the mainstream ones are, and have brought in spiritual directors to be additional counselors to because priests are too busy. Which is why it's also the same sort of training, right?
Yeah.
So life coaching is similar, I think, in that.
Right. Yeah. So she's so she works specifically with people who are experiencing burnout. So she helps people to helps people to, you know, first off, overcome the burnout that they're experiencing. Oh, you're breaking up a little bit. Are you still there? Oh no. Hello. Here, I'll disconnect and reconnect because oh, there you are. Sort of. You're back, but you're on mute.
Okay, we're back. Hopefully the first part of that recording wasn't lost due to whatever glitch, because my whole screen shut down the Zoom completely.
Oh, okay.
Then it flared back to life. So we'll see. Hopefully we didn't lose all that, because this is a really enjoyable conversation. But
well, I mean, if we did lose it, I'm really having fun talking to you.
Ditto, bro. Ditto, man. I'm fuck yeah. You just bring back so many regrets because we didn't know how good we had it when we had it in many ways, you know. Here's a good old picture from the good old days.
Yeah.
Temple to Hootie. So your wife, does she work with magicians who've gone through burnout, or just regular people?
I would say so. She works with so far she's worked primarily with women, but I mean, she's definitely open to working with men, and she's definitely open to working with magicians. That's for sure. Cool. I would say that magicians specifically would do well to work with her, because her whole thing is soul alignment. So, you know, the basic thesis is that you're experiencing burnout because you're doing something that isn't necessarily aligned with your soul. It's not something that's aligned with the deeper parts of you. And so you don't want to do it anymore, because the deeper parts of you are crying out and asking you to do something different. So instead of resisting this urge, like it's the first step towards, towards becoming your truer self, right? You have all this, you know, maybe you have all of this dissatisfaction with much of your life. And what she does is she she helps people to find like the way that where their souls really want to go, and she gets them on that direction. And the best part of it is that she gets them in that direction by reminding them how to have fun.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Because because so much of, when you're relaxed and you're having a good time, like you're pretty much in natural alignment, right? And so if she can get you to consistently have a good time and have more fun in your life, you're going to have less burnout because you're having fun. And moreover, the more fun you have, like the more you're going to discover what it is that you need to do to solve the problem of burnout in the long term.
Yeah. Just adjusting here.
Sure.
Switching sides. Is she religious or Christian at all in even any sort of way?
I think that she would say, well, actually, she would say no. I think that she would say that she's a deeply, she's one of those people that are like deeply spiritual, deeply intuitive, but she doesn't follow any particular denomination.
Because this is something I recommend to everyone. This is Merton's Palace of Nowhere, and it basically is what I use to revise entirely my understanding and appreciation of the teachings around the higher self, higher genius, and all of that. Because so this was one of my teachers. I got to learn from him for a while in seminary, James Finley. He was a student back at the Abbey of Gethsemane of Thomas Merton, and he wrote this book summarizing Merton's teachings of the true and the false self. And it's a tiny little book, and it's just absolutely brilliant. I haven't stopped reading it in 20 years now, or in 14, 16 years since it came out, and since I met the teacher. And interesting stuff.
Cool.
Because Thomas Merton had such a interesting take on theology and also human life, and it's interesting to see a teaching that mirrors so closely our own spiritual tradition and this whole higher self. This stuff that frustrates so many people, and like the holy guardian, whether it's holy guardian angel or higher genius or higher self or all of that stuff. He's sort of taking his perspective of the true and the false self. I found simplified things in a much more functional way for
do you find it to be? Does it help you to understand the higher self in a more accessible way?
Yes, but specifically also the way he talks about the process of going from the false self to the true self is so alchemical and but also grounded in real life issues, because this is what Thomas Merton did. He taught and was a spiritual director for the novitiates of the Trappist order he was tied to and in, when he wasn't off in hermitage, which was most of the time as an Aquarius, actually born the same day as me. January 31st. Me, Justin Timberlake, and Thomas Merton, all January 31st. I know, go figure, right?
That's hilarious.
Yeah. I don't know. So yeah, that's a. What's your take on higher genius, higher self, holy guardian angel? Look, so much has come out on that in recent years, and it's such a kettle of worms for some people. What's your sort of, as someone who's gone through the Golden Dawn and through that system, and I'm guessing that you got a lot out of it. You said sort of as much as you could, and just where are you at with, what's your take on it from your own perspective, from your own journey?
That's a fantastic question. It's something I go back to again and again and again. I think so. Okay, I'm gonna sort of take you on like a kind of whirlwind of perspectives on the deal. All right, great. The first place that I go is actually 3 books of occult philosophy when it comes to this stuff. Agrippa talks about how, he brings up a variety of spirits, right? He talks about the house angel of the 11th house, as being a guide, and he goes to like a variety of other ones. But what Agrippa says is that basically, like, none of these completely satisfy him as like a definition for the guardian angel. Now that I'm saying this, I'm realizing that that my understanding of what the higher self is, it may differ from a lot of people's. Have you ever encountered an ecstasy before?
An ecstasy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, ecstasy is a big part of in my magical experiences. I mean, when just the other like at our last operation, I mean, people described feeling extremely high afterwards. To me, that is the, if not the state, this symptom of ecstasis, which I think is important to contrast with ecstasy. But they're both the same centrifugal or centripetal expressions of the same light, whether they're going through Yachin or Boaz, right? The way they manifest out of us, either into an inner ecstasy, or an expressive ecstasy outward. But maybe you're talking about something different here.
No, I mean, I'm not really, I guess. Okay, when you, this actually goes back to sort of this radiatory or this radiational approach that I was talking about before. When we talked about Enochian angels, and we talked about how the mere presence of that angel is transformative for both the area that you're working in, and also for the magician themselves, right? One of the gifts that this radiation, or this approach gives you, is that you learn how to inwardly identify. You can inwardly identify where this spirit resides after that. I know that we're starting to get really heavy into there, but
that's good.
One of the things that happens to you as you perform magic over decades is that you gain the ability to sense when spirits are present. You can go into nature, you can go, or just like whatever, in your own home, in different situations, you can sense when spirits are present. Not just any spirits, but specific spirits, because you have experience with those spirits, right? So over time, you become accustomed to the force of a particular spirit, right? To the force of an angel, or or just the presence of an archangel. And then when you're out in the world, you will sense this spirit present in different situations. Angels and archangels, it's a little harder because of their nature. But when you start to work with more natural forces, say like celestial forces, like fixed stars or planets, you can start to sense them around. This does relate, I promise, this does relate to the higher self.
Well, I'm with you.
As you're doing this work, the first thing to pay attention to is where it is where you can sense where these spirits, when these spirits are present. Because that's an important inward sense in the achievement of sensing the higher self. Because the higher self the higher self is a drop in the ocean of the Holy Spirit. I'll put it that way. As you can sense these spirits, you will come closer to sensing your higher self. Okay, so that's like ingredient number one, right? Is the ability to sense the presence of spirits. Ingredient number two is the ecstasis that we were talking about before, or the entasis that we were talking about before, extremely sublime states. These extremely sublime states are very important because they have their own radiational aspect to them. When you can sense spirits, this ecstasis that you feel has a spiritual force. It's a spirit in its own right. And so over time, as you experience this ecstasy, that's the spirit of that ecstasy can be communicated with. And it goes back. So I'm starting to realize that this conversation that we've had is a very blessed one, because all of this is all tying together, right? The negotiatory aspect of working with a saint like Cyprian is very important, because through this devotional aspect you can work with a spirit, you can negotiate with that spirit, right? And with the spirit behind this ecstasy, a negotiation can happen there too. And when that negotiation starts to happen, that's when the higher self can start to be present.
I love it. I mean, it's hard to think about this as you present it theoretically, and I know it comes from your experience, but it makes me think a lot about, well, the GD got very worried or concerned themselves very much with, and this is where you see the occultism happen of the Victorian age, when they started to worry about, well, what is microcosmic, what is macrocosmic, what am I experiencing within myself, but what's actually out there? And they started to worry a lot about that. Whereas in my impression of the Grimoire and Solomonic tradition was that wasn't ever really a concern. They were like, we're summoning these spirits outside of ourselves. They're showing up here, or they don't show up.
Yeah.
So it didn't matter whether you debated the microcosm or the macrocosm or the egregores or whatever. That didn't.
Right. There's like very little internal aspect to it.
Yeah. Whereas and then the theory of the Golden Dawn, as it developed, especially through the Whare Ra temple in New Zealand and all of that stuff, right? Because we're getting tons of information coming finally at long last. It's a shame they didn't. Whare Ra didn't connect with the Ciceros when they started and Whare Ra closed. Then we could have just had an international Golden Dawn world that was actually directly from the original. That would have been amazing if those two little things had just been sewn together, but they didn't know about each other, and etc. Plus, the New Zealanders were pissed off at Rigardi sort of for publishing their secrets. So yeah, though he got enough wrong to probably count it as Crowley's secrets, like it's so Crowleyized, Rigardi's stuff. We create shells as a Hierophant in the temple. We create shells of these forces, and it makes me think a lot about what you're saying with this ecstasis. Even when you do God form work yourself, you're creating this egregoric shell, and that does create kind of ecstasy when you go into it. And the idea is that the shell is what attracts the macrocosmic force. So the microcosmic creation of the shell of a being is what attracts its analogous component, the actual spirit from the macrocosm. And that was their theory on how those. But it really ties in with sort of what you're saying about how the more you create these experiences and tap into these experiences as they are, the more it draws to itself magnetically the actual external force. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. So to talk about it, like, I guess now that we're talking about it, like it's pretty easy to put it like in an Agrippan model, where when you're working with God forms, you're working with you're working sort of in this twilight state between celestial and super celestial. Because a lot of the god forms are still, they're still very much concerned with, they're very much concerned with natural matters, while still being much larger than those natural matters, and really being much larger, much more, by larger I mean expansive, much more expansive than most celestial forces, right? What I'm talking about is as you practice working with higher celestial and even bordering on super celestial, you're starting to create almost like a whole, or a you start to create a relationship with the super celestial, because you keep going back there. As whenever you go to any spiritual experience, the more you go back there, the more it's what an old teacher of mine used to say, the more you establish residence. As you push the envelope and as you go into the super celestial, the more you're establishing residence there, until eventually you can negotiate with the super celestial. And that's where you start to, that's where the true self starts to come up.
Yeah. Is that Agrippa's take, would you say, or your take from Agrippa?
That's my take from Agrippa, because Agrippa didn't discuss God forms. I'm sort of like mushing together like God forms and celestial magic.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting. Yeah. Oh.
Man, I haven't had a chance to go full adept in a long time. You know what I mean? Like a question like, what do you think about the higher self? Like, I can't answer that unless I take out all the tricks.
You got to take out all the tricks. I mean, I really still love I think the Kabbalistic framework is still very useful for this stuff, for the spirituality stuff, especially the neshama is clearly, as it encompasses the three supernals, easily called the higher self. What we're talking about, like if there's a higher self on the tree, it's the neshama, right? If there's a true will, it's probably the yechida, right? You could argue it's Hakma, or you could argue it's Keter, right? Of course, blah blah blah.
Hard to answer.
And then of course you throw in the term Holy Guardian Angel, you get a whole mess there, because a lot of people think it came from the Golden Dawn, and it sort of did, but it was never part of the Golden Dawn. There was no teachings on the Holy Guardian Angel in the Golden Dawn whatsoever. It was not something anyone did. It was considered something that was to do with this grimoire that Mathers happened to translate. But then of course Crowley ran with that and got himself into a mess with that, because he was the one to start drawing sort of parallels or conflations of higher self neshama with Holy Guardian Angel, which was originally basically a grimoire archangel, that when you start to conflate it with the neshama, you stop seeing it as an independent being and start of yourself. And then of course you have those people coming out saying, look, that's not what this angel that comes from the grimoires is. And I think I don't worry about those debates too much, other than I find them interesting and fascinating, and they're great debates to have. As a practitioner, I've been working with spirit guides since I was first initiated into an esoteric tradition in 1988, right? Since then, I became very aware of spirit guides, and I was 7 years old, initiated ceremonially into transcendental meditation, had my whole initiation, had another one a couple years later when you turn 10, but then it's twice a day mandatory meditation, and you just open up to this whole world of reality as you start to do that, especially when you get the second initiation and get your adult mantra at 10 and start sitting down meditating. You just become aware of space and reality in such a radically different way, even if it's just meditating twice a day for 10 minutes each time. You meditate 1 minute per age you are old. And as a result, I've had lots of spirit guides. Astrologer mother, got taken to psychics my whole life as a kid, taken to healing classes, psychic classes, all these classes, all like before I was 13, 14, right? And so like the idea of having spirit guides has never been a problem for me. The problem has always been when people start to aggrandize the roles of these spirit guides, or to give them authority that they shouldn't actually have. They shouldn't have authority to dictate the free will of a human soul, for example.
Mm.
Right. So saying, oh, this is my true will and that's why I did it is a shitty, lame excuse, right? Like,
Yeah.
you take some responsibility, motherfucker.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
seriously, especially if it is a part of you, then it's all your choice. Don't say it's the divine side of myself that's forcing me to you know, abuse people to get rich, or remain poor to prove my holiness and righteousness, you know. It's
So
all your
that's so
responsibility.
so what you're talking about right now actually goes to, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No.
It goes the one of the things that well one of the things that the higher self does is the higher self is very much involved in your fate, right? In the events that are happening around you. You as a person, an aware being, as a magician, have the extraordinary privilege of having just a little tiny bit of free will, right? You can slightly bend the fate. When people say that they had to do something because their higher self told them to, that's not how that's not how the higher self works. You have to do something because you may have to do something because the events in your life have compelled you to do that thing, right? That's the power of the higher self. The higher self just is like, you have this event now. How are you going to do it? How are you going to deal with it? You know, the higher self has the power of fate. You have the power of free will. But to me, like, the higher self would never just come along and say, well, since you can speak to me, I'm just going to tell you to do this thing. It's not going to do that. It's going to say, it's just going to thrust you directly into the situation that you need to be in.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always seen it, the sign of being in touch with your true self as represented by the flow state. You know, that state of optimum efficiency that athletes talk about, the zone, mixed, which comes about from living far enough outside your comfort zone that you are constantly challenged by what you are doing, but not incapable of accomplishing it and doing it effectively. So it's that very delicate place, and if you can live in that place, that's where I've always found that I'm able to best sort of feel the whisperings of guidance, and tweak my approach so that you know, and you know, when I'm in that flow state, I feel the flow from above, and when I leave that flow state, I feel that flow get cut off. It's like, okay, if I don't maintain that state, it's like, well, okay, I can go be a free agent, but I might not have the grace of that state, you know. It is tricky stuff to discuss, but worthy, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Totally. I mean, and this is like this is probably like some of the more difficult things to talk about, but it's also the most important things to talk about, right? Because this is basic why you're doing this spiritual work in the first place, sort of talk.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, like, Skinner came out straight up and said his magic has nothing to do with spirituality, and the last thing you'd ever want to do is use magic to try and improve your spirituality. He says that.
Yeah.
He said that on Glitch Bottle. I'm quoting him in my new book, so I had to like write down those lines verbatim and, like, you know, keep winding it back and get them
I
fleshed out,
guess
because it's interesting, because I think his point is accurate. His point is accurate. Magic has nothing to do with spirituality, but I don't think he's correct to draw the, and I have an interview that will be coming up with him, and I look forward to getting into this with him a little bit more. I want to talk about academic stuff because I'm curious about his journey as an academic and
sure.
magician, you know,
Yeah.
like, interesting. He's had an interesting life, and everyone's always asking him about how to summon demons better and stuff like that, and I'm more interested in hearing his overall journey, you know. But anyway, um I don't think it's true that you can't use magic for spirituality, because that makes no sense. What else are we doing in these initiations? What else is an initiation except magic used for spirituality, right? He's
Mm,
like, no, spiritual creatures are better for achieving material things and physical things. They're doing things in the physical world that you can't do as a human very
mhm,
easily. And they're very good at doing some of these things. And I think that's true. But I do believe one of the things they're good at doing is when you do, like, for example, a grade opening before an initiation, what are you calling on? You're calling on the mighty archangels, angels, kings, rulers, and elementals be assembled in this mystical sphere, right?
mhm,
And then through the god forms and the movements of the temple and the whole initiation, those spirits are, their energy from that Enochian tablet are directed a certain way, and that is the
mhm,
initiation. That is what makes the initiation a Golden Dawn initiation. Is all those god forms, movements, and other forces brought. It's just so complicated. It's remarkable,
mhm,
and that's probably why people have such profound experiences. And that makes sense to me. You can call these spiritual beings into someone's sphere to initiate them, to bring about spiritual change, whether it's elemental or planetary, and that is magic for spirituality. So I don't agree with him that you can't do that, because I think that's exactly what initiates are doing.
mhm.
And why can't you use a spiritual creatures for initiation? And we have a very long history of doing that. We just don't have a long history of initiatory orders passing down the magical tradition, as he has successfully proved. I think that the magical tradition is passed on between magicians. Like,
Mhm.
just like everyone who went through our order, the thousands of people who went through our order in the years it was around, in the 20 something years it was around, how many of them are still practicing magicians? A very small amount, I'd say.
Sure.
Very
Yeah.
small amount. So still,
Mhm.
even the magical orders of history, going back to the Ordina Goldene Rosenkreuze in the 1700s, right, from which we get our grade structure, also the SRIA. I mean, they didn't; these groups aren't responsible for carrying on the magical tradition. The magicians weren't carried on by Rosicrucians or by Freemasons or by anyone else. Those organizations, whether it's GD or Martinist or any of them, produce a very small amount of serious lifelong magicians who
That's
pass on
true. Yeah.
who record their knowledge, pass it on to students, and and can really be called, practicing magicians or
Mhm.
sorcerers, if you like, right? And that doesn't necessarily go hand in hand with being an initiate. It really doesn't. Um,
Yeah.
you
Absolutely.
know,
Yeah. Um, one thing I'd be really curious to hear uh, Stephen Skinner talk about is how magic has changed him.
oh, good question.
How because I mean I guess I definitely see his point that magic is just isn't done for spirituality. Especially because especially like the goetic magic that he's interested in. Um, because it's very much it's very much a practical matter um with that. But when you're standing in the presence of spirits, that does something to you. You may not want to you may not want to I would think that it does something to you. You may not want to believe that it does, um but it changes you, and I'd love to hear, or I believe that it changes you, and um I'd love to hear whether what he thinks of that.
You should email him and get him on Esoteric Nerd for your co-hosting slot.
Oh, that's a
Yeah,
great
so you and Edward can both go get into it with him, and maybe plan your questions in advance, since Edward's another ruled by the planet Vulcan as a Virgo, and almost as scatterbrained as me sometimes. Maybe
So
more,
he
who knows?
when we got off the line together on Esoteric Nerd, one thing we were talking about was like um co-hosting an interview with just people involved in like a spiritual subculture that doesn't otherwise get a lot of exposure.
Yeah.
Um and we did like some early research into that, and uh we found the Raelian Church. Have you ever heard of this?
Dude, they're next door to me on
Oh,
Vancouver Island.
really?
Dude, that's why Prince Harry and Meghan Markle went to Victoria, and were doing all that charity work, it was because this is the conspiracy theory. I love it. I
Yeah.
fucking love it. This is one of those fun ones.
Yeah.
They went there before going to LA because they needed the Raelians to clone her. So she's actually in their lab still, and the clone of her is out there, along with Hillary and all these other clones. Everyone's cloned now. Everyone's
Yeah.
cloned, but it's the Raelians doing it. But there is a lot of sketchy stuff going on with the Raelians. And they were into the cloning technology when it was big, like 20, 30 years ago.
Mm.
And who's to say someone didn't give them a ton of money and they are trying to clone humans, like
Sure.
who knows? But anyway, that's one of my favorite things. That's why. So the Raelians, yes.
Yeah. So I mean, like I would love to interview basically anybody from that.
Oh,
Anybody
I'll
from
see if
that.
I can get in touch with someone. I know
Like
people who
and
live
I
over
mean,
there.
I definitely, I just want to hear their story. I want to hear what they have to say, because a lot of, I'm guessing that there's a lot of crossover between the experiences that you and I had and the experiences that a lot of other groups have. And I just want to hear more stories about stuff like that,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's fascinating stuff in a lot of ways. So yeah, Raelians. I mean, yeah, cloning. Whew. I don't even know where to go from there. But yeah, the Raelians. They were on Vancouver Island. You could maybe the best way to do it would be come visit, and we'll go raid their compound and see if they want to give us a tour.
No, that would be a blast.
I could do with a slight clone upgrade for this old clone body I'm wearing. Give me one without celiac disease, please. That would be nice.
I'll ask my wife if she wants to go to Vancouver. We've been itching to travel a lot more. Oh, by the way, if I before I forget, her moniker on Instagram and other forms of social media is Feel Good Ferments. She also has a life coaching account, but the one I can remember offhand right now is Feel Good Ferments.
Awesome. Yeah. So good for anyone seeking a bit of life coaching or know more about it. There you go.
Yeah.
Feel Good Ferments on Instagram.
She's out there.
And something else. Yeah. What other interesting little groups are there out there? I mean, Edward mentioned the Source family to you. I was big into the documentary when it came out. Very interesting sort of family that they had, the Source family and the Aquarians. They were an interesting bunch. Though they did, I can see why in the documentary they just breezed over their whole ceremonial magic phase, just like breezed over it. And then there was the ceremonial magic phase. That was crazy. And you see someone going like this, and then it like cuts on, and then it's like, then we went to Hawaii. It's like, wait, what? So it's like that would be a whole other. It's a single episode documentary, the Source family, though. It's not one of those. That's one of those that see a lot of them. There's too many episodes for these things, right? They're like they do 6 episodes when they could have done 2 or 3. This is one where they should have done 2 or 3 instead of just one, because there's actually it would be interesting to see all that stuff. But maybe I'm sure there'll be another one in the future, especially with all the still existing Aquarian family members that are out there probably still practicing magic and stuff like that, who are like, yeah, they did us wrong. They didn't emphasize all of this cool stuff we did. But yeah. And you were mentioning how you'd like to just run out there and join all the cults and see what happens.
Oh yeah.
Brother,
yeah,
when I heard you say that, I was like, speaking from experience, maybe not. I mean, I spent 14 months in Northern California the other year, up until and through part of COVID. I did a big lecture at PantheaCon on Yeats's Celtic Mysteries, and that was massively attended. It was like packed auditorium.
Cool.
I was quite blown away. Yeah. It was cool. I got to have cocktails with like Chicken Sandra and Lon all at the same time. And
cool.
And Dan Ortiz was there from ISIS.
Yeah.
And
nice.
we were all. I have a great picture of all of us together, and it was a good time.
Wow.
But yeah, that like the Isis Oasis there, which is part of the Fellowship of Isis, and comes out of the old Union Temple Isis, which was founded by Jason Lauderhand's student Arissa Victor in the 60s, 70s. And Lauderhand was the protege of Paul Foster Case.
Mm.
So that church came about through the Boda tradition, essentially mixed with a love of Dion Fortune and Egyptian stuff. And they have a whole little compound there that was
Mhm.
started in the 70s. And you know, I knew it could go well or it could go badly.
Mhm.
And when I got there and realized that that no one on the property was actually interested in studying Hermeticism or Egyptian magic at all, I knew things probably wouldn't go well long term, and it would be maybe a shorter trip. So I started booking other events all the way down to Mexico and up to Texas to see old friends and do book signings and lectures and blah blah blah, all that sort of author touring stuff.
Mhm.
Um, but then COVID hit, boom, right after PantheaCon. I can't even imagine how many people at PantheaCon I must have given COVID to because I had it the week before.
Oh no.
Yeah, but didn't get tested till after PantheaCon because we didn't know it was a thing really. They didn't tell
Mm.
us. Like
Mhm.
the news, like, we had like the ridiculous people in charge of California saying, like, I was watched the TV one day when the guy came out and said COVID can't transmit, will only transmit at Trump rallies, but it won't transmit at BLM rallies. And I got to hear that said on the news, and I was like, wait, what? Like, we've entered crazy town. It's crazy town. It's make up anything you want now. Like, just
Yeah.
make it up. What's true for you? Remember that good old 90s question? What's true for you in your heart? This
Yeah.
is what's true. And it is true. It's objectively true. Now go shout it from the rooftops. Like, it was just, everyone went nuts, of course, there and burning everything down, Um, so those communities tend to, it seems, not last very long with their original focus, right? Too rapidly, people see an easy power grab. People start flocking to those communities who want power. That's what happened at Temple Tahuti as well. Like our latter year philosophi and stuff. They no longer wanted to do the work. They wanted all the honors and all the power and titles without doing any work. And we were like, this is not how this goes. You should leave. And Tahuti would have survived if I had expelled like 10 people when I was told to. The second order was like, just get rid of all these people. I'm like, yeah, I think that's the old way of doing things. They should be allowed to stick around and be part of the community if they want. It's like, yeah, but they're writing letters slandering you behind your back because they don't want to pay dues and they think they should be more respected by new members. It's like, these are fucking philosophy, right? It's like, I'm sorry, you've gone through the system now. If you've gone into Portal and you don't want to do rituals anymore, you're never going to get invited to the second order, and you don't want to pay dues, and you don't want to teach classes. You just want to go to meetings and be the head of this little group that makes decisions for something that doesn't even matter. That's what happens, and and it doesn't work in a small temples and temple environments, right? Like they get cast out. But in larger cults, you might say, there's land, there's property, there's income, there's all these
Sure.
things, and that just attracts the worst of the worst because people
Yeah.
realize all they have to do is spout a bunch of new age nonsense, chant love and light, but then secretly just kowtow to the leaders there, and next thing you know, they're getting some cash out of it, and they never had any spiritual instances at all. Like, I saw that there was just it created a toxic environment for everyone involved.
Mhm.
It was like nightmarish. Like, yeah, like, so go join a bunch of cults if you want, but honestly, I don't think it'll go that well. Did you do much Enochian work in your time in the Golden Dawn?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah?
Mhm.
What sort of stuff did you get into? Because we did some
So,
weird stuff when I was involved. We did like some weird stuff with the Bonorum Heptarchia that had nothing to do with the traditional D methodology. It was
oh
we
yeah.
rewrote that stuff it was rewritten by our adepti to be Golden Dawn and also to line up with the operations we were doing, like Jerusalem or Prague or whatever, or not Prague,
Mhm.
Strasbourg. And so did that change much in the years that you were an adept in the order? What
No,
were sort of Enochian did you guys do?
so okay, so the two things that come to mind, um, the two things that come to mind are so that description that I had before of working with the Enochian kings as sort of a zodiacal liaison it's completely undocumented, and but it did seem to be very powerful. So there was that, and that was probably my first adept project, because what happened from there was you could establish a really good presence of a zodiacal force, and then after that it was very easy to overlay a planetary force on top of that, so that then you could start to get into you could start to scry, for example, the sun in Aries, the sun in Leo. You could start to try to find out why, when planets are in detriment or fall, like what exactly the effect is of that. Like, I mean, yes, it's generally bad. They're not happy, they're sickly, they're weak, but what does that do in the world? How does that actually affect things? And so my first project was to sort of hack the Enochian kings into doing this work, so that we could set up stuff for scrying, for better scrying of planets. So that was the first thing. And then the other thing that we really got into, well, actually there's three, hooray. The second thing was, we used to do these vigils that involved I want to say there were the angels of the Benorum.
Yeah. That work was being developed when you met me, I guess, in like 2000, 2001, that those operations were being developed, and so you and sort of would have seen the further evolution of them than I was working with. So that's really interesting to me.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Like that's probably one of my favorite memories, is like it's been like, it's been like maybe like 13 hours or so since you started. So like, let's say that you started at 6 a.m. and it was a wonderful time, because it was like, it was a vigil, right? So you would call in one of the angels of the Benorum, and then you would just experience the presence of that angel, and then off you would go. And you were going to be doing this for like 24 hours. So you had a long way to go, right? So like, so you would call in an angel, experience the presence of that angel. That would be like 20 minutes to half an hour or something. And then you come out of temple, you just like rest, relax for like half an hour, right? Don't do anything particularly spiritual, because by the way, at the top of the hour, you're going to call a whole other Benorum angel.
And since they're 24 hours, sometimes it's 4 a.m, right? You haven't slept.
Right.
We would go through pots of chai, that because we'd be fasting as well, right?
Yep.
So like, just all we drink is straight chai, no creams or milks or anything, like straight raw chai.
But I remember like 12 or 13 hours into it, like
I love that you can start a sentence that way.
you just call like some random Benorum angel, right? Like I mean, not random, like, you know who they are, but you weren't expecting anything spectacular to happen, but all of a sudden, like, zang, you're floored by this overwhelming spiritual experience of this angel. That's one of my favorite memories. And then the weird thing is, you just come out of there and then you just relax again, and you just like keep going. So I remember just having these like overwhelming experiences, and then just pressing on, like residing and then pressing on. Pressing on.
Yeah.
The third one was weather magic.
Oh,
using the elemental tablets for weather magic.
Tell me more.
Oh,
like,
okay. That was so there are particular spirits of the tablets that are involved in the weather. They're the airy portion of the water tablet and the watery portion of the airy tablet. They give you an excellent base. Then I haven't thought about this in years and years and years. from there, there's this interesting like secret of, well, I call it a secret. I feel like everybody, I was the last one to the party on this one, but the so-called secret is that the God forms have tremendous relation and sympathy with elemental forces, which is why they're used in initiations.
Yeah.
When working with these elemental tablets, bringing in the God forms besides gives you great authority in those elemental tablets, so that then if you have something to do, it becomes very easily done. So for example, if it's just really, really hot and muggy, and you have like 120 people that are going to be in the same room the next day, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, then it's time to cool things down. And so you can cool things down so that the next day people don't like fall out because due to heat exhaustion or something.
I'll have to
Or
remember this when I visit Texas.
Or the other thing you can do is you can work with, you can just work with the winds, right? So you can work with those two portions of the elemental tablets, and then work with the God forms to do really, really broad, expansive work using things like the jet stream.
Oh, interesting. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a website where you post much magical workings or anything like that, or
I keep saying to myself that I really need to do that. I am slowly teaching slowly. I think I posted 2 videos so far on Instagram, on my Instagram account. I'm slowly teaching a way to gain direct access to the it's not the higher self, but it's something really close. I'm teaching a way to gain direct access to that through meditation and dreams.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah.
So probably I'm going to make more videos that just teach things like that.
Is that on publicly available that people can find that, or is that private? Yeah. Where can people find that?
It's right on. Hang on.
I can always just post a link. We can sort that out.
I don't even know what my own account is on Instagram. That's how new I am on Instagram.
Yeah. I know. You're late to the party. Most of us are trying to leave it. Dude, their new terms of service give them permission to access your contacts, your bank, like go into your bank app and check your bank statements.
Wow.
Like,
okay.
That's how it seemed to me. I mean, people can go read the terms of service themselves and interpret what they want, but I'm pretty sure they're always doing a little bit more than the terms of service say anyway, right? And I've had DMs while I'm writing them to people, like edited while I'm writing them. Like I send the message, the person sees it, and then the message gets deleted.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And we noticed that because we caught one. We were sending photos back and forth of pages of books and sigils. We were talking magic. And so we were screenshotting as we shared images and snippets to notice, and then little comments we would make. And because we were doing so many screenshots, we caught one of the messages mid-deletion via Instagram. Wow. It's like, holy shit, they just deleted this. And it was like
it's interesting blatant. That you say that, because I know that people have sent me things on Instagram, and it like they'll show me their Instagram profile, and they're like, see, I sent you this thing, and it just hasn't shown up.
One of my buddies here in Canada, all of his texts to me are blocked. He gets my text to him, but all of his texts to me are blocked by my phone service provider. They won't answer why. I've tried to find out why. They're like, it's not possible. And I've showed them, because you can show them, you can prove it. You can be like, here's screenshots from his stream, and you see all these messages. And for 10 months, I didn't get a single message, and still don't. And they won't even answer why that is. It's just like, are you kidding me? This is crazy. This is the world we're in now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I work in technology, and I
didn't know that.
I guess I have a very unconspiratorial attitude about it because I know people that work in
That's
technology,
good. That's good. We need more of that.
and we I shouldn't say they, I should say we mess it up all the time.
Mm.
I just I tend to believe that they just wrote software that was that poorly written that it could just randomly lose text messages.
I mean, obviously that would be ideal. But because like Google's announced that they now will go into your Google Docs. I like most of my writings in Google Docs because I got tired of losing writing, or not be able to access it when I wanted. And they've announced like that they will go into your Google Docs and edit out anything they consider wrong or not good.
Okay.
Yeah, they've announced this. It's like what?
All right. Let's make something else. I want to make something that's hands off, that is kind and polite, that doesn't and is not evil. Like, because that seems to be a really hard combination. I don't know why.
To not be evil? I know. You think it would be so simple to just don't be evil.
Right. Well, right, but who are we quoting now, right?
You know you're in trouble when a company's motto is don't be evil and they remove it. Just like your country's in trouble when its 3 leaders are named Bush, Dick, and Colin. Sorry, I'm just being a Canadian, just having some fun here.
Please continue having fun. Somebody's got to have fun.
Someone's got it. We us Canadians, we're so fucked these days. Not as bad as Australia, but we gotta talk a little shit. Just a little shit. Yeah.
I found my Instagram profile. It's jzabinski.dolios. Oh, and by the way, you asked me about projects that I was working on. There's a really obvious one that I never bring up. I have no idea why. It's called jzabinski.dolios because I have an LLC. It's called Dolios Software Solutions, and I'm making a web app. It's a traditional astrology app that is going to.
Please tell me it's going to give the planetary hours. I just want to click one button and have the whole day laid out.
No problem. It's going to do.
I'm tired of doing math. I'm running out of crayons.
I wanted to do so much more. So I talked about before about how I was compiling Agrippa's system, right? Because Agrippa does have a system that is scattered piecemeal throughout 3 books of occult philosophy. And if you put it all together, you have something very substantial. One of the frustrations or one of the problems with his system is that it is tremendously mathematically complex. For example, if you're going to look, so he works with celestial magic, right? Stuff like planetary talismans. To really use his system the way it's described, you have to examine the condition of the moon. You have to examine the condition of Mercury, examine the condition of whatever planet is you're working with. You have to get the planetary hour just right. There's a tremendous amount of things that you have to get right. I do this sort of work every month. It takes me around 2 or 3, more than maybe around a dozen hours to look through all of the different talismans that he talks about. I'm making a web app that's going to automate this entire process so that you don't have to do this anymore. I want celestial magic to be accessible so that when you need to know, okay, when can I work with the moon? I want you to immediately be able to see that. When can I work with Mercury? I want you to immediately be able to see that. And so I'm working on a web app right now. It's called digitalisman.app. That's my full-time job. I am not stopping until this thing is done. I realize what a karmic thing that is to say, but this has been in the works for years, and it's time for it to happen. So that's what I've been doing since July.
Sweet. I might have I've been bugging a friend to consider doing something like that, but maybe he can talk to you. Maybe if you need a hand, or I don't know. Who knows?
It's funny. It's funny you say that because a friend of mine just he told me he would love to work on it with me, and I was like, well, you're not going to. I don't want I don't want you to work on this for free. I want you to be able to be paid. And he was like, well, you don't have to pay me. And I was like, no, I need to pay you. If you're a professional programmer, you need to be paid. And so I just set up. I was expecting to just like go into my cave and work on this for a year and then come out and have my product. But already like people are already approaching me and they're like, I want to help you. So I just the contracts for independent contractors are being written now.
Oh, wow. So you're it's cool that you're willing to let people on board to fast track this, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Really
And I mean,
cool.
it needs fast tracking. So
I mean, obviously the math isn't that hard to do to figure out planetary hours. But like
right.
if you're doing this stuff every couple days, if not every day, and you just sometimes you're like, hey, I want to do something now. You don't want to sit there and calculate all the hours and be like, oh, how much leeway do I have to work on this thing? And you just be so amazed. Oh my God, the fact that there isn't something like this already is a little mind-boggling. And they say, I guess that's the litmus test maybe for creating an app, is when you're like, why isn't there something like that everyone needs, that we all talk about, and no one's made it? Well, that's when you should probably make something, right?
Right. Yeah. So there is an app out there. It's called Hours. And you give it
the sunset and sunrise time.
You give it you just tell it where you are.
Okay.
And it spits out it'll tell you, it'll give you the planetary hours. And the other thing it gives you is it adds up the essential dignities for you.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I know there's a laptop app that doesn't work on phones that people I know use. But often, if I'm at another magician's place and I have my backpack full of gear, and the next day we decide to do another operation, you might not have a laptop with you. It's just convenient, hey, we have this technology, we may as well make it work for us in whatever way we can.
Right. And then that's one of the goals of Digitalism, is to have everything. So okay, one of the goals is to make it so that it can run anywhere. So it'll so it's a web app. So basically it's a souped up website. So anything that has a browser can run this stuff. And then the really ambitious goal is to do all the calculation on the device. So that so usually what you would do is you would have a web server, and then you'd say to the web server, okay, get me all of the elections in this given time frame. Web server goes to work, figures stuff out, gives it back to you eventually, and then you're done. Well, the state of technology is good enough that we should be able to have individual devices do these calculations for you. So it should be way faster than what it would be if it's on a web server. But also, by the way, once you have it, you don't need to be online anymore for it to do work for you. So like you said, like when you're, when you have your backpack full of stuff and you just have your phone should be plenty powerful enough to give you everything you need.
Yeah, that would be great. That'd be great. Well, good. It's how apropos that you are in fact working on something I've been pestering people about for a long time. That's wonderful to hear. Wunderbar. Like damn, man. So hey, frater out there, if you're listening, you know who you are. Let me know if you want to get in touch with Joe, or let Joe know if you want to help out, or who knows. Well, I just look for what do you think theoretically what would be the time that it might be done? Like, what's a conservative estimate?
Done, a conservative estimate would be, I originally thought it was going to be done in July of 2022. I'm going to say September of 2022.
Yeah.
That's my guess right now.
Cool.
But it's up. Digitalism's there. There's not much to see at the moment. It just shows you a sample chart, but believe me, it's going to be regularly updated.
Wow. Amazing.
And if you go to my Instagram, Zabinski.dolios, it's going to have regular updates with like these little videos that tell you about stuff. So basically, if you go to Zabinski.dolios, it's going to show you both the progress for Digitalism and then also any other coursework that I provide is going to be all up on there.
Awesome. You should do a guest lecture at my Hermetic Mystery School one of these months.
Oh, what do you want to do? Do you have any subjects in mind?
Anything you want to present. It's sort of a master class type of group. Most people in it have a lot of experience. Some are more new, but we teach in I teach in a certain way, right? Because I have a scholarly nature, so I tend to not show people just one way of doing thing or the right way of doing thing. I tend to give them a survey of ways of doing things, and then go into the breakdown of my experience, other people's experiences, and the different ways you can test different formats of magic to see which might work best for you, or whether or not you want to work with it at all. Because
Right.
that's why, I think I tell people, like, you should try Enochian magic long before you have all the tools, because the last thing you want to do is spend all that money and time making them and then be like, oh, this isn't really for me, or I'm not getting out of it.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you can't do Enochian magic without a table of practice and all the bells and whistles, you probably can't do it with them. Though I do also acknowledge, it's like my old bishop used to say to me, if you're not a priest going into your ordination, you're certainly not one coming out, which is awesome but radical statement, right? But it makes sense in a certain paradigm. And so yes, I can see the argument that someone who might not be very good with magic or might be new to it might have a much higher chance of being successful with all the bells and whistles and doing everything by the book. That is true. However, if you can't get anything out of it, just doing a pared down sort of Lon Milo Duquette way with a paper ring, maybe it's not for you. So don't go spend thousands of dollars making and buying all the tools, or let alone pure gold rings and shit like that. So
that's actually been I'm glad to hear you say that. I think that so two things come to mind that, like, I feel like they're not talked about enough, and they need to be talked about more. And one is how to explore systems that you've never seen before. How to go about investigating, and also, like, how to bring the things that the tools that you already have on the table to bear with new systems. That's something I feel like that's something that's not really talked about much, because it could take you 6 months to a year of good work to understand a system, or it could take you 10 years of bad work. It just depends on how you approach it. So it's like the first thing that like I feel like needs to be talked about more. And then the other thing that needs to be talked about more is results. What exactly happens in the world when you perform a magical act? How do you know that how do you know, or actually not know, that you've succeeded? How do you know that you failed? What are sort of the one thing I've definitely found with magic is that there's no easy answers, right? Like you perform a magical act, and you see something like blatantly obviously happen that involved that act. How do you know that the act that magical act that you performed actually brought about that result,
instead of just correlation, right?
Exactly.
And we had an interesting case with that. We have interesting cases like that every time we do ritual work, because every time we do ritual work, something remarkable happens, and you're like, causation, correlation. Though again, I think this is a subject that has been healthily tackled by everyone from Israel Regardie to Francis King, and just so many. The list goes on and on. How many people have tackled the metaphysics of how magic might work? And I don't mean metaphysics in the New Age sense. I mean in the proper sense of how does this affect reality? And of course, what the problem is, when you ask that question, you are then asked to bring up the bigger question, which is metaphysics. What is reality? Right. And then you're in a real shit show, in the real soup of time, because it's like as soon as we participate in things, we become part of things in a way that we wouldn't be otherwise. So the fact that every time we do ritual work, we get results congruent with what we wanted the spirit to do. So, if we didn't do that work, good example, we worked recently with a king of the fairies, an Irish king of the fairies.
Oh yeah, okay.
And it was during Ida, Hurricane Ida, right? And one of our members who was performing this cyber ritual with us was, basically in the path, or is pretty close. And while working with the king, we just wanted him, he's very much a clearer of the pathways, this king, this fairy king. And so we were like, help people get to Safeway. That's help people get not to Safeway, get them to safety. Help people get to safety, because like show them the way. And he said very clearly to us, he can do more. And basically said he could affect the actual storm. We're like, we'll do that then. Like summon all your airy and earthy spirits to you and get your fairies to do some stuff. Then we stopped the operation. The whole operation is less than an hour, about an hour, less than an hour. Before the operation, it was a 4. Afterward, when he said that, right after he said that, we checked and it dropped to a 3 and lost 15 mph. And it dropped to a stage 3, right? It was almost like he wanted to prove to us that he could do something objective, to show off a little bit.
Yeah.
Who knows how much that helped things, if at all. Plus, I also believe that probably more magicians were doing magic for Hurricane Ida than have ever collectively done magic for maybe anything ever. Because I know a lot of magicians did stuff during the Trump years, and but to counter causes. There was, you got David Griffin doing saving Trump, helping Trump against all the evil witches and wizards, and then the ones all working against him. But with Hurricane Ida, I don't think any magicians were doing magic to make the hurricane more destructive. So, and never in history has there been so many well-trained practitioners around. And even just your average dirt magician, remember that term, or hedge witch, doing anything is going to make some sort of difference, I believe. So think of all the people that were actually trying to make a difference there, and that I think is worth considering too. But yeah, so yeah, what do you conclude from these workings with spirits? To me, it just always goes back to the metaphysical question, really, about what is reality. And I think the understanding of magic will come not when we understand magic better, but when we understand just what reality is, or what Sir Roger Penrose always says is what the matter is, because he doesn't like being called a materialist, because he says we still don't know what the matter is, so don't call him a materialist.
That's very interesting.
It is very interesting, right? I thought you'd like that.
Yeah,
I love that. He is a famous materialist, but he doesn't like the word, because he's like, we don't know what the matter is. We don't know what metaphysics is in a technical sense. We just don't.
Right.
And
right.
we have more questions than answers.
Yeah. I don't think I'll tell you right now, like, I have no answer to this mystery.
I think we're still not asking the right question. I think that's what it comes down to, honestly, with all this stuff. I think we haven't asked the right questions, and I don't think anyone has the right questions to ask yet. And that's the biggest hindrance.
Interesting. So
I love science. I'm a big fan. I'm just just a layman, though.
What are the shortcomings in the questions that you see?
Many. We don't understand the relationship between perceived reality and objective or non-perceived reality. We don't understand what reality would really be like without our perception of it, right? Like when you think of how animals, let alone spirits, might perceive reality, right? And it only takes a little psilocybin or DMT to see reality in a vastly different way, from a whole different, DMT, you're not even in your body, and it's like you're ripped out of your body. Like DMT is the only time I've ever, other than astral travel, I've been in a spiritual state where I could turn around.
Wow. Yeah.
Like freaking turn around, because normally there's the seat of the of the soul perceiving it consciously.
Right. You're looking through the window a little bit differently. That's what it normally is.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
that's one. Another one, I guess, would be, these are great questions. He's good. Yeah, I missed you, bro. God. Well, we don't understand. I guess the whole vibration. Yeah, we don't know what the matter is. We don't know what it is.
Yeah.
We don't know anything about really how it works. We're just starting to understand it. I think we'll once we can see dark matter, we'll know so much. I think
But
we'll
that
just
and
be
that
throwing out a lot of the old questions.
that goes those two things like that we just don't understand the nature of matter. Um, it's related to your earlier problem of that we don't understand the nature of perception. Um, we don't know what the world like you said before. We don't know what reality is like outside of our perception.
Yeah.
We don't even know that that reality exists. It's a problem.
Yeah.
We're assuming that it does because you live in the world and things change outside your perception, and so therefore there must be some objective sense, but of course you can never prove that because
I address it a little bit in one of my books, where I write about aporetics, the study of openings and stuff. I talk about the idea of the chora, the abyss, philosophically speaking, between the perceived objective and the perceived subjective, and the conflict that arises, not only in the interpretation of reality but the experience of reality, right? So creating openings or having questions is very similar. The metaphysical openings and questioning as a mental practice are very similar processes, it appears, right? When we have something in reality, a metaphysical aporetic or aporia, an opening, is something we don't understand about reality. Anytime we don't get why apples fall from the trees, like I think we still don't even really understand gravity or whatever that is.
Mhm.
Apparently there's new theories coming out, and some of the stuff in geometric unity is just mind-boggling. Like, we might be throwing out old science altogether at some point in the future. um, um, and that might be something that we can't reconcile in this lifetime, in this world, right? That might be the case. That might go back to St. Paul, seeing through a glass darkly, and when we die we see the fullness. One of my
Mhm.
fun thought experiments these days has been to say, what if one of the preconditions of existence after we die, because there's preconditions in this life that connect us all to a consensus, for example, like gravity, hunger, these basic things that we all understand: tactile, touching, your space, my space. you know um, I can't occupy the same space that your body occupies, right? And we have limited knowledge based on our experiences and knowledge and understanding. But what if one of the preconditions of existence after this life is omniscience? What if that's like gravity or air to spirits, and they especially human souls? What if as soon as
Like
we die, we actually have access to all knowledge? We're like, oh, this is like the air we breathed when we were alive, but now
mm,
it's this sea of gnosis. And like, that's what was so fun about being in this body, was that you didn't know everything, so everything was exciting again. you know Maybe that's why spirits are waiting in line to have their goof embodied.
because then you just won't know. Well, I guess so. I mean, there's beauty in the mystery, right?
You could say that is the greatest beauty.
Hmm.
Yeah, the mysterion.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'll send you a copy if you want some time. Boom. Ethics of
Sure.
Ethics of Understanding God, which was originally titled Semiotic Study of Hermeneutics and Mystical Dialogue.
I like the first one better.
Semiotics is my main. Yeah, well, that was the publishing title after. There's the academic title, and there's the popular title, right? You don't
Yeah.
want to call something, yeah. You don't want the word semiotics and hermeneutics in a published title unless you're only writing to academics, which, you know. So yeah,
If you send me yours, then I'll send you a copy of the dictionary if you want it.
deal.
Okay, great.
I love you. That's beautiful.
Love you too.
Yeah. We have a little bit more time. So if we want to explore that idea a bit more, we can. I'd say it's an interesting one, and we'll definitely have to do another round in the future on this stuff. But it's interesting. I'm fascinated by Dr. Otto, and Marcel Mauss had some classical theories, but I liked Dr. Otto's. He's in Leipzig, and I got to be there a couple of years ago. Though I didn't have time to go into the archives and look at the Kelly documents. If I had had time, I should have made the time while I was on tour in 2019, 19 in Leipzig to copy all of Kelly's manuscripts so I could then, translate and publish them. Because no one, I think, has done that yet of Kelly's stuff that's in Leipzig, his alchemical writings, but anyone could. But Dr. Otto is the main esotericist at the University of Leipzig, and he considers magic to be an empty signifier, which is a semiotic term, right? Which basically implies that there isn't any substance to the idea in itself intrinsically, and that it is purely constructed through the semiosis of human agreement. We just feel it's an empty term that we can just, that therefore sucks in any other meaning that is given to it, and therefore might be sort of useless. So he plays with that idea, but also lets it he studies it within contention of the lived practitioners who, as he admits, are not a bunch of incredulous occult tasters, as Dion Fortune's phrase, but are actually educated. He always says that, like, with surprise. They're educated. They have degrees, and they're still doing magic. This is strange. He even said he recently was interviewed by Dr. Puka on Angela's Symposium, which is an up and coming great channel, really. Especially like that she only appeals to academic sources, which pisses off so many magicians, right? Just like Dr. Sludge pisses off so many magicians when they're like, so which orders would you like to join? He's like, none. I don't believe in this stuff. I'm a dialectical materialist. This is nonsense. Even my wife's a rabbi, and I don't really believe in that stuff. Not intellectually, physically. Like, it's like, it's frustrating to a lot of magicians, but I think we need those perspectives very crucially to keep us grounded, and yet also not be limited by those restrictive methodologies, because their base assumptions are often so fucking absurd, the academics who study esotericism. And I don't want to piss any of my friends off in that field. I love you all, but some of the base assumptions are just, you could only make if you've had no contact with magicians and magical communities, like serious ones. Like when they talk about re-enchantment versus disenchantment, when they talk about just everything, it just reeks of, like, none of this seems at all relevant to me, or these are not the relevant questions to ask, which is why we also need practitioners who are also scholars but understand both methodologies and can explore that liminal space.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But he did say he's open to getting a bunch of people in a room and having them all do sigils and then seeing if what works, which is of course not how we do these things, but his point is made, and it's cool that he'd be willing to do tests. For example, we just made some sigils recently in my group, and some people let them settle for a few days. I like to let mine settle for a few days. Some people decide to wear theirs right away, and they're hot. They're physically hot.
Oh,
they
I
feel
see.
Really hot. There's your thing to study.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, what does that mean? What does that mean? How do you study that? I'm sure you can. It doesn't make sense that a piece of paper 1 minute feels one way, and then after you do a bunch of prayers, and attack it with the sign of the Emperor, all of a sudden it's really hot against your skin.
Right. Yeah.
And everyone experiences this mostly. What's up with that? Well, study that. Someone should study that. Anyway, Dr. Otto, if you're listening.
You bringing up people getting together and all making sigils together.
Dude, we did this on Zoom. We do cyber magic.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we do. We tried one cyber magic experiment. It was so overwhelmingly effective. We do one a month now.
Huh. What do you do? I mean,
Mostly,
Yeah.
we've been doing a mixture of we sort of have been alternating between fairies and Enochian D purist angelic magic, because we're
Mm-hmm.
every, like, for example, I was able with a few months of prep and that's sort of like going through pretty much every book written, reading everything, yeah, including like Whitby's doctoral thesis instead of his synopsized abridged published book of diaries. Like, download the doctoral thesis, go through all the relevant parts of that and every other relevant published book. I mean, this is what I mean by it's tedious for a lot of people, and my approach is not good for everyone. For some people, they should go to Marco Visconti or Frater Xavier or whoever else they want. 22 Teachings is a popular one that I hear good things about. But my approach is to lay out usually the full spectrum of
Yeah.
the study. I want people to know how I got to where I got to with these things.
Yeah.
And that's why I cite my sources and references and don't pretend it's all just my own genius.
Sure.
People, I criticize a lot for quoting so much. I'm like, it's because I know where my ideas come from and I know they're not mine, you motherfucker. It's like, it's not because I'm trying to fill up my books with unoriginal thoughts taken from some other people. It's because academics are trained to identify where all their thoughts came from. And if you fail in that, you fail. F,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you write an idea down in a book and it turned out it came from somewhere and you didn't notice, it's an F. You fucking failed. That's not how academia works. I'm sorry, it's true. It's like getting an
Yeah.
answer to a math equation wrong. Well, that's even changing these days, but let's not go there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's different right answers depending on your socioeconomic background. I don't think that's how math works, but anyway.
My
So
background's going to move around a little bit.
that's
I'm
fine.
gonna plug in.
Yeah.
But I noticed there's an interesting, having known you for as long as I've known you, I noticed that you have a meticulous and a thorough nature.
Thank you.
And like I feel like a big part of that was your magical training.
Oh yeah.
I mean, not to I don't know, not to I'm not saying that the degree of training that we both went through is something that's generally good for everybody.
Certainly not.
But at the same time,
At the same time.
brought you to the office.
All right. How officious.
Yeah, I feel like we've covered so much ground.
You said the amount of training is not good for everyone. At the same time, then I lost you mid-sentence.
Oh, okay.
But at the same time.
Oh, but at the same time, it teaches you how to go beyond yourself when it comes to work.
Yeah, honestly, bro, I would not have probably even survived my younger life without the Golden Dawn. Like, I was coming from, there was a lot of abuse going on when I was young, and the Golden Dawn very much gave me the power and the confidence, skills, training, self-awareness, learning responsibility, and being able to problem solve situations that no kid could solve on their own. You know, and then when life threw me some serious curveballs later on, like when the doctors told me like only a few years left, I wouldn't have survived that and struggled to look for a way out of it. That wasn't not for the magical background, even though I could barely move for several years during that nightmarish time in my life. And so I really do attribute the magical training to getting me through that period, because there was many a days. If you can't really move much for a few years, it becomes very likely you're not going to see a reason to stick around, right? Especially since once you get disabled, that all people pretty much drop you like a fly, like family and friends, usually, in my experience. It's just too much hassle, people. I don't really hold it against people. We all have these short lives to live and want to enjoy them. And, and if someone's in chronic pain, all of a sudden, what can you do, But the magic definitely gave me the willpower to resist just packing it in. and to look for solutions even when I was being told by doctors there were none.
Yeah.
Like just fucking die
Right.
already. Like they basically were saying that, like, sorry kid, game over. And yeah, the meticulousness, I mean, that came a lot from grad school, but the magical training it does remarkable things for your willpower and for your problem solving abilities. Not necessarily finding magical solutions per se, but just being willing to not give up. Like, don't be afraid of failure, and persevere. I mean, these are the lessons. To not be afraid, to face your fear, and to not give up are the two main guiding principles in the Golden Dawn, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
From the beginning, like, why else would they be the two main lessons you're taught in the beginning?
Right.
If it wasn't because that is the answer to pretty much everything you're going to face in life.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, and it's, yeah, it's frustratingly simple sometimes. You know what I mean? Oh, you don't have the answer yet? Well, just keep going. Just keep going. I know you're despairing. Do you want to stop? Do you want to give up? Do you want to possibly commit suicide? Nope. Just keep going.
Yeah. And so when you're at a place in life where you can only see, and everyone informs you that every day will not only be as bad as today but worse.
Mm-hmm.
How do you live under those circumstances? And I think those are circumstances a lot of people are living under, and
Mm-hmm.
there's no solutions presented by society or even religion anymore for how to try and survive and succeed, if that is a word you can use in such horrific conditions, but just persevere through those conditions. It's just, and if this magical occult revolution that's going on in the world can do one good thing, it might be to help show some people some ways of persevering and looking for options even when you're told there are none.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what magic's always been, right? It's people at the limits of science or current contemporary understanding in any given place in time, trying to go beyond, right? That's something I think is really important that people forget, is that Dee and all of those people were not idiots. They were, in fact, the height of learning in their age.
Right.
They
Yeah.
pursued.
Yeah.
They went to spirits because they'd run out of all other options.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What yeah. Any other, I'm just curious, any other memories of me from 20 years ago when I was a
Oh,
well, you must have been through some initiations where I was an officer, I guess.
That sounds right.
Because you were at Vancouver's Temple Tahuti for 99 and 2001.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, well, it's cool I wish I could remember some of the rituals we would have done together, but they were probably largely attended.
I feel like
we did a Celtic mystery ceremony in 99 as well as 2001, I think, maybe just 99. But if you were there in 99, you probably went through the first full performance of my first Celtic mystery ceremony using Yates's system.
So two things come back from my memory. The first is that I'm pretty sure that I was initiated into Practicus at Tahuti.
Cool.
That happened, I think.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I remember, is this was in Ontario, California.
Yeah.
I remember that there was an invocation of Thoth, and that I think you were essentially like channeling Thoth at this time. And like all these people lined up behind you, and they or not behind you, all these people like lined up at the altar, and you just like whispered these little things to them. And I have never I've never completely forgotten what it was that Thoth said to me at that time. He said, you can be with your family and also be of service. Which is like, it's great. It's fine. It's perfectly good advice. The thing that experience taught me was that was the first time that a spirit had come to me and pointed out that there's what you believe to be the strictures of a situation. There's the actual strictures, and then there's something somewhere in between. And that what you believe to be true is not always what's true. That's what I remember that you said to me. See, so you had a lasting impact.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, I still, I what can I say? I'm still up to my old tricks, I guess. That's, you know, that's what we do. Then the spiritual information really is about not something complicated or
right.
It's about, like, getting the right information at the right time, and if you can take that moment, then yeah. And yeah, I'm glad we did stuff like that a lot in the old days there, and that we were rigorously trained in it, like brutally trained in it, because the last thing you want is some egotistical fuckhead just like inventing shit and literally making it up without proving that they can do the operations and get actual content.
That's how you get closer to the truth, right?
Yeah, it's and we did test that stuff. Yeah, but that's another thing. That's another whole thing, isn't it? Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, man. It's really cool to hear that stuff, and I've really enjoyed the last few years connecting with people from the past magical order days and all of these things. It's I never wanted to not be in touch with all of you guys, but due to he who must not be named, shit, that's how shit had to be. And so thank God that time has moved on, and all of us who were young pups are now doing things and talking with each other and being like, oh yeah, taking ownership of our magic again is very much something I had to do in the Hermetic and ceremonial world. Like, I had no problem just doing my own little bardic thing and working with Celtic fairy spirits for a long time and learning how to integrate my magical skills with performance, and which is a really cool skill to have, man. If you can, it's like once you know how to, like, we don't have any, if once you know how to summon spirits or work with different energies, you can only get better at it, right? It's pretty reliable that it's going to work once you know a lot of the stuff on how to do it. And it's like that with performance too. Once you get to that skill level where you can bring down a house consistently over and over again, then the magic and the music really merged together, and that was something that just consumed me, and that was no problem making it my own. But I was always scared. It was Edward who got me back into the Hermetic world, really, by saying, look, I need a break. Can you sort of get your butt in action and share some of what you have to offer with the world? And I was like, no. No. He taught me for a year and a half, or maybe 2 years, before eventually I started, tapping in and seeing if it was the right thing for me. And it really was. A lot of things. It's very clear. My life is much worse when I'm not practicing magic. Things do not go as well. That's a fact. It's not the other way around. I don't know why you have all these people these days saying everyone who practices magic's life falls apart. It's like, I don't know, maybe everyone who practices it badly, as we've discussed, is like again, if people don't take the advice offered and then just go do what they want to do, and shit, then things fall apart. Well, that's why.
Yeah. I think that one of the major reasons why people's lives fall apart when they work with magical forces is that those magical forces are built on a solid foundation. they are where reality comes from. And so if your life is not built on a solid foundation, it will quickly fall apart, because you're coming up against the wall of, you're coming up against something that's very strong and very well established. So yeah, it falls apart, and then guess what happens? It comes right back together, and it's freaking amazing.
Awesome. Yeah. Amen. Well, on that note, that's a great note to leave it on, brother.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what a wonderful, I can't believe the time flew. It's been 3 hours already.
Wow.
Yeah. Awesome. Over 3 hours. So yeah, what a great,
man.
great catch up.
Yeah. I love rekindling friendships like this. I really do. Yeah. And like anytime you want to talk about stuff, whether it be magical, whether it just be like, I can't believe that my garbage man left the garbage, that's all fine. I would love to hear from you.
It sounds like a plan, man. I pay extra every month, so I have US unlimited calls, and I make good use of it, calling many people in the States. And what else can you do after being locked inside for almost 2 years, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Yeah,
I lost my job with COVID, and still am not allowed to work.
Wow. Okay.
Crazy. Yeah. Well, Canada, okay. I'm not even allowed to go to the bar or the restaurant or to a film theater here. So yeah, it's that's not good situation for a performer. I know there's some ways to get around it and all that stuff, but people are self-enforcing it. Like venues are self-choosing to not hire unvaxxed performers, and musicians are getting pressure to not work with unvaxxed performers. Like the new Superman comic has him fighting the like demonic unvaxxed. That's the new enemy for Superman, the unvaxxed. It should be
That's great.
I can't imagine it being a long series of comics, since I'm pretty sure you could laser us to death pretty fast, all of us. Oh God. Yeah. But yeah, crazy cultural times. I'm glad we didn't talk too much about that sort of stuff. When I have someone with your expertise and vast knowledges, it's really just a delight to do a depth talk, as you said.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's great. In New England, there's not a lot of this, but so I always love catching up with old friends. But Jason Miller does live in Vermont, so it's not totally quiet.
Yeah, I got his strategic sorcery here. I couldn't get through it.
Really?
Not a fan of Jason Miller. But that's okay. That's the thing. That's why I love the Occult Revolution. If someone's not your style, there's someone who is. Like, we have a variety of people. And,
absolutely.
People have so many options that are reliable options. They're reliable.
Yeah. Options. I think that like having learned a thing or two from Jason, I would say that he would probably say the exact same thing. And also
impressed with himself either. I'm gonna get in so much trouble for this one.
He's as impressed with himself as we are of ourselves. So that should tell you something.
I love it. All right. Cool. Yeah. Well, we probably should end this off so I can get some cooking for the family here. So.
Okay, sure.
Brother, yeah. I'll give you a call. We'll talk more inner order shit and trade interesting techniques and stuff.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. We can trade interesting techniques, or just like honestly, like memories come back to me all the time, and I'm like, I wish that I could talk to somebody about it. Well, you're somebody that I could talk to about it.
Yeah, definitely. I was there. Cool. You must be taking your ginkgo and not smoking the devil's lettuce then.
Yeah, it's mostly the lack of devil's lettuce, I think.
Well, we might do a thing here on one of the islands next June. Maybe you can come visit, and we'll we'll get you to do some legal 5-MeO DMT.
Great.
When in Canada.
yeah. I would say as long as they come back in one piece, but you know what? I've fallen apart and come back together enough times that I'm not even concerned with that anymore.
Oh, we could go on all day. I love it, brother. Thank you for being on Magic Without Fears. And
you're welcome.
Everyone knows how to find you. I'll put some links below if I bother. If I don't, that's life.
Sure.
Everyone knows
Yeah.
how I roll.
Okay.
So yeah,
All
and
right.
a guest lecture would be great to my Hermetic Mystery School. We had one from Edward last month, and I'm trying to get a guest lecture every month. It's basically like, half-hour presentation and then half-hour Q&A or some version of that.
I
If it
could
goes an hour and a half, people usually don't mind. People, usually, but
I could
everyone's,
totally do that. Sure.
that'd be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, whatever. If you Agrippa, Celestial Matt, at this point, you have an idea. So
I think Agrippa would be a good one for people would love to hear about that, especially from someone who knows it as well as you do.
sure.
Not to mention with
Okay.
the Purdue book coming out and everyone getting excited to be on the
Oh, yeah.
CIA watch list.
Yeah. I bet Eric Purdue would be thankful.
Yeah, if you're listening, CSIS, we're just joking. All right, brother. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a wonderful night, and I'll talk to you again.